Today's show brought to you by the In the Money newsletter. This is the best way to keep up with all the content we've got going on the In the Money Media Network here on YouTube. We have our iTunes podcast arm, and we've also got great written content, lots of great Derby content right now over at inthemoneypodcast.com. The newsletter, you subscribe, you get it once a week, sometimes twice a week, and that will put everything in order for you so you don't miss any of the best content. inthemoneypodcast.com/email, and sign up for this free email newsletter and drop a comment on either our Derby or Oaks Monster Pods, and you will get a chance to win a $200 free bet on the Kentucky Derby. Leave us a comment on either show. Let us know who you think is going to win the Oaks and Derby, and also subscribe to the free newsletter. We'll pick a winner at random, and we appreciate you very much. That link to sign up, once again, inthemoneypodcast.com/email. Hello and welcome to what's annually our most popular show of the year, the Kentucky Derby Monster Pod. This idea we started on a lark a few years ago. It's taken on a life of its own, as you can see from the running time. But I promise you, you will not regret it, even if you have to take more than one session to get a chance to check this thing out. We've got great insights from a who's who in the racing industry. And I, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you in the Brooklyn Bunker, will be co-hosting with my man. Often he's coming to us from the planet Texas. I think he's at, oh gosh, am I going to get it wrong? Is it El Casa Rojo? Is that where you are right now?
Yeah, I think it's Casa de Rojo. Casa de Rojo. not to be confused with the one-eyed horse Un Ojo. Casa de Rojo.
We'll get to him. We'll get to him in a little bit, Un Ojo. But, you know, the Derby, this is an event for you. I think it's not an exaggeration to say it forged you as a horse racing fan.
Absolutely. In 2009 was the first Kentucky Derby that I went to. And outside of a darn pandemic, I would have kept the streak alive of not missing one. It's exciting. They say it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports, and it's for a reason. And the reason being is because there is no we'll get him next year. There is no, oh, we're going to draft a better quarterback. We're going to trade for a receiver. Oh, if we can only get someone in free agency. There is no next year. If you cannot run in this race on Saturday, May 7th, you're not running. And that's what makes it so special. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for these horses, for these connections. And those 2 minutes are like nothing else. When they run by you for the first time, it's a feeling that I can't describe when I try to tell people who've never been.
Like nothing else in sports, like nothing else in racing. And I'm really proud of the cast of characters we've put together here. A couple more interviews to go where, you know, obviously we record this stuff out of order, but you know, without making you play favorites or anything, you pleased with some of the insights you've gotten from these industry insiders, JK?
Yeah, so far so good. We got Maggie Wolfendale. She's on the Oak Show. We caught her at the airport, which was fun. Let's see. I'm trying to see who else we got. There'll be some good stuff. We've got some good stuff running around. It's fun to hear different people's perspective on different situations. And I think it's you can listen to Pete and I talk over and over and over again. And I'm going to continuously tell you how bad I want Zandon to win because I have a future wager on him. So a 2-hour show of me putting my personal interest in front of yours is not going to do you any good. So I think this is a better way to go about it.
It does make a lot of sense when you put it that way. In terms of our final insights, final answers, those will be coming. We're going to be doing a live streaming show on May 4th, exact time to be announced. It'll be archived as well on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave us a nice review if you like what you see, or you can follow us over at In the Money Media on iTunes. And we've got our blog, inthemoneypodcast.com as well. You're right about running around, JK. I feel bad. We haven't gotten a chance. Ever since we took that romantic sunset bike ride at Big Sur on the Peloton, I've barely seen you. Was it something I said? What do I have to do to get a second date?
No, look, I just been running around. I was on a 2-week road trip. Back on the Fox show tomorrow, which is not going to help anyone because that's not today for you. But in this world, I'm back on the Fox show tomorrow. and then I'm back on the road again, running around. But I will see you in person on Wednesday of Derby week. And some people are probably watching that as if it was yesterday. So sorry for all these days. I know it's very confusing, but I was just answering Pete's question.
There you go. Great stuff, JK. Let's get to the show right after this. Today's show also brought to you by In the Money Plus. Hey, we're still doing everything we always did outside the paywall on the In the Money Media Network, but we've also got our Plus service. You get some extra content, extra shows. We're going to have extra stuff for Derby weekend, extra writing, and you also get little digests with the picks from all the shows as part of Plus. $15 a month. This is extremely competitive given that you get our whole Derby package for that money. And then it keeps rolling throughout the year with lots of extra content around the summer meets, etc. InTheMoneyPodcast.com/plus is the place to go to sign up. Check it out. InTheMoneyPodcast.com/plus. Next up on the show, a trainer looking to accomplish something that's never been done in the history of the Kentucky Derby, because he was awarded his first Kentucky Derby win earlier this year when Mandaloun was put up, and now he's got 3 chances to become the first trainer to ever win the Kentucky Derby twice in 1 year. He is Brad Cox. Brad, how are things?
Great, Pete. How you doing?
Would that mean anything to you, a wild accomplishment like that? Or would it be more about you living the dream you told me about years ago on one of our 10 Strike podcasts, just to get that thrill of winning the Derby in real time?
Yeah, no, that's the goal, is to win it in real time for sure. So it would be great if it happened this year. We would definitely be happy if one of our colts could get there. You know, someone texted me the other day, we have 15% of the field. I said, well, hopefully 5% of the 15 is a winner. We'll see how it goes.
That's great. Well, I do have to rewind one bit. What kind of Kentucky Derby victory celebration do you have when you get the news so far after the race? I mean, is there dancing? Is there celebration? Are there fancy dinners? Or how does it go?
I was sitting on the couch, I think, watching TVG, and I got a text that, you know, they made the decision, and I think went upstairs. I packed my bag. I was leaving for Saudi Arabia the next day to go that weekend to watch Mandaloun or be with Mandaloun when he was going to run in the Saudi Cup. So no, there wasn't really any celebration, and it was kind of unexpected. But we're kind of left in the dark the whole time with everything as it's gone on. But you know, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, it's one of those things where there's nothing we can do about it, so it doesn't matter if we know what's going on or not, to be honest. So don't worry about anything. We don't really worry much about what we can't control, and we just, you know, press on.
That's a winning attitude. That's a winning attitude for sure. And I'm kind of not surprised in the life of a horse trainer that not much time for a quiet reflection and thinking back to what was going on last year, because you got so much going on this year. Now, nominally, you know, the gimmick of the show, of course, 20 horses, 20 guests, which, you know, we're breaking format, obviously, with the great opportunity to talk to you. But let's start with the horse that you're nominally here to talk about, and that's Tawny Port. At what point did you get the idea that Tawny Port might be a contender for a race like the Kentucky Derby?
Well, I think it's really once he broke his maiden. I mean, his pedigree suggests he would stretch out. He was able to break his maiden at Turfway this winter. You know, we thought about bringing him right down to the fairgrounds and you know, starting him in a lounge race on the dirt. But I said, you know, I talked it over with John Fort. You know, I said, you know, listen, if you could, let's not change too much. Let's keep him right where he is. Let's try him around 2 turns again on the synthetic. And if he runs well, let's ship him down for the Risen Star. That's exactly what happened. We were happy with his race in the Risen Star. Florent rode him that day, came back, some good feedback. Me and John had huddled up and thought, you know, listen, if we want to take a swing at a big purse, we probably don't need to really chase Epicenter around there again. Maybe we come back and we get him back on the surface and take a big swing in a $600,000 100-point race. We did. He picked up 20 points, and immediately after the race, John was like, you know, we need to nominate to the Lexington. I said, well, we already did, because the noms closed a couple days ago. And he said, you know, if this horse is doing good, I think we really need to take a shot. As we got closer, I kind of thought, you know, he might jump off that idea. But, you know, as we got closer to the race, the horse, and even the day we entered the horse, I kind of thought to myself, you know, maybe we'll just we'll still look at it, and I'm not dead set on running, but we're just going to watch him. And we did, and he didn't give me any reason to not run him. He really, really didn't. I know that's a thing we don't see much anymore, running horses back on short rest at a high level. Or at the top level, I guess you would say, or a graded stake level. But the horse didn't give me any indication that he wasn't doing well. His weight was great. He had an easy half mile, I think, the Monday before the race. And, once the entry came out, I thought, if he's doing well, let's take a shot. And it worked out in a big way.
It sure did. And when you look back at that Risen Star, that's interesting. You say you were happy how he ran. I mean, I think superficially, a lot of people would say, what do you mean he was fifth, beaten 7 lengths? But you go back and you look at that trip, and he didn't break well. He had trouble after that. He did keep trying. So maybe there was some hidden ability for the dirt shown there. And that's certainly what it looked like the other day in the Lexington Stakes. At this point, what surface do you think Tawny Port is better on, synthetic or traditional dirt?
Well, I think he's pretty good on both. His numbers are similar on both. But, I'd like to tell you the dirt, because, there's a lot of options for 3-year-olds on turf and dirt moving forward, where, you can make a lot of money. Obviously, Naira has a great circuit for 3-year-olds going long on the turf, I should say, and then obviously the Triple Crown Series and other, lucrative derbies throughout the country for these 3-year-olds going around 2 turns on the dirt and turf. So, it's really hard to say. I do think he's obviously shown he can. He actually hasn't shown that he can run on the turf because he's never had the opportunity. But we think when they run on the synthetic, the way the races are run sometimes with the pace, that it'll translate over to the turf. So right now I would have to say the dirt, because he's never run on the turf. So he's run on the synthetic, but he's solid enough. I think he's an honest horse. I really do.
Have you seen any sign from him or any indications that the tougher test of the Derby, the added distance, are going to be things that are to his benefit? I mean, he's looked excellent, but obviously just on the numbers, this is a big ask, and he's got to step up. Are you seeing any reasons why he might?
Well, listen, it's going to be back in 3 weeks. And, listen, you're probably right. Like on a buyer scale, he probably needs to move forward 10 to 12, maybe as much as 15 points. That's a hard ask. It's a big ask in 15 days, or not 15 days, but 3 weeks. We'll see. I mean, he did come out of the race in good shape. If something happens, if he got a perfect trip and, maybe a pace collapse or something, he gets a good trip, he could be right there. So I do think he'll get the 1.25 miles. So I think he'll stay on, and that's a positive. So, like I said, right after the Lexington, he's probably definitely not the fastest horse in the race, but the 1.25 miles is something I think he'll take too, and we'll see how it goes.
Let's talk about your other Derby runners going next to Cyberknife, Arkansas Derby winner. Really curious to get a trainer's perspective on that race. It was an unusually run race, very fast early. Cyberknife certainly showed toughness as he ran through the lane, but also I thought, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but maybe a little bit of greenness in the lane there as well. What did you make of Cyberknife overall in Arkansas?
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I know he totally runs that way, but he's improved. I mean, I don't know how many of his races you've watched, but he was DQ'd in his first race for, running erratic down the lane. His second run, he was switching leads late and not really going by the other horse and not focused on, going forward more to focus. He was maybe waiting for the jock to tap him with the whip. He just wasn't focused on, moving forward, and then obviously broke his maiden in his third run and almost, of course, almost catch him. But listen, that's just kind of been him. And, talked it over with Al Golden. I've always thought, he's a horse that the more he does it, the better he's going to get. And I definitely think he's really run more professional in his last 2 runs. And I think he's a horse, the more he does it, the better he's going to get. Overall, the race in Arkansas, I thought was a really good race, because when Florent turned up the backside and started splitting horses, I thought, man, if this horse gets run down, he's going to be in trouble. So he stayed on. I thought he showed. I thought it was impressive for him to make that move up the backside, split those horses, and then almost take a little bit of a breather into the turn, and then kick on down the lane. And, it takes a very talented horse to make a couple different runs in a race. And I think he's getting a little overlooked, but, it is what it is. He's really, really seems he really seemed to move forward after that race since he's moved to Churchill. He's had some great mornings training. He schooled in the gate last week. He schooled in the gate this week, and he's moving well. He had a fantastic work this past weekend. Just worked in a minute. I think I had him in a minute too, and was well in the bridle and galloped out great, and doesn't really seem to take anything out of him. So he's a horse. Another one I do think 1.25 miles with his pedigree is out of I believe a Flower Alley mare that I just produced. I'll have another, and obviously being a gun runner, I think the 1.25 miles he was a classic winner. So I don't think he's going to have any issue with the 1.25 miles.
I had one. This is a tangential question, but while I have you, after the Lecomte didn't work out great, now granted he had an excuse in there with no trip, the idea of going into that allowance race, I've heard horsemen talk about it almost like a confidence booster to take them from the tougher competition and race them somewhere easier, that it can help a horse mentally. Is there anything to that, or did that just seem like the next logical spot to run him in?
Well, I think there's a little bit there's something to it, but it made the most sense. I mean, I think we were 5th or 6th in a grade 3. We didn't need to come back and run in a grade 2. And that's basically how I look at it from a trainer standpoint. You try to, me personally, I like to run where I'm 8-5, not 30-1. And that's what would have been happening. And I think it's what I think, these horses, I mean, if they keep getting beat over and over, they become okay with that.
Right.
And whether you want to say it's confidence, but, I think you have to run them where they can compete. And I think that's the ticket to a lot of this, and having success in the afternoons is placing these horses properly. And I thought it made the most sense for him. We could have come back in the Louisiana Derby, but with going to Arkansas, we were able to get another week. We were able to take a swing at a grade 1 as opposed to a grade 2. And I told Al Gold, I said, listen, I think this is a very good horse. He knows he's a good horse. And, let's take a swing at a grade 1 because we think he's a grade 1 horse. And, we could be facing Epicenter, which is obviously a grade 1 talent as well. And, I thought it made the most sense, and it worked out for him. So it took the grade 1 off the table, and it took a little pressure off. But, obviously the Kentucky Derby's, goal number 1, and we'll see how it goes.
Let's talk about Zozos, your third runner in the race. What he lacks in experience, he certainly seems to make up for in talent. The big question when I look at Zozos, years ago on the 10 Strike Pod, I remember you telling me that at the sale, you're much more apt to look for a horse bred to go a mile on the 16th, and try to get them to go the 1.25 miles on training. When I look at Zozos' pedigree, personally, I see a horse that, maybe wants to go a mile, but maybe he wants to go 7 furlongs. But you look at his form, and it's something very different. Obviously, the distance agrees with him. But at what point did you have the idea this was a horse that was going to stretch out?
The first time I run him, and he didn't run as well. When he didn't run as well first time out as I thought he would. And that's the honest truth. I thought this horse was – I don't really know.
I mean, he won.
But I know. But when you watch the replay, he's on his left lead. He's kind of doing it. And honestly, I can't think of the name of the horse that Deshaun Parker, I think, rode for Steve Asmussen that day. That horse kind of almost he kind of dropped in a little bit. And I'm not so sure if that horse continues on straight, he probably wins the race. And it was almost as if we just kind of fell into a win there. And obviously things would be a lot different if we hadn't broke our maiden. I was a little taken back when he didn't run maybe a little faster or better first time out. He raced a little green, and then we stretched him out. And it's like, okay, well, there you go. That's the horse we thought we had. And he liked the 2 turns. He's able to put himself up in the race, but he's a talented horse. He's very talented. He's a very strong horse. And, based off of physical standpoint, Nick Sko taught me a lot, because Nick Sko didn't necessarily look like a horse that was wanting to go much more than a mile based off his physical either. I mean, he was not the biggest horse in the world, carried a lot of weight, heavy muscular horse that, obviously he got a little older. That most of these stallions or colts put on weight, they put on muscle. But he's a very good-looking colt. Like you said, you may not walk up to him and think, wow, he's screaming a mile and a quarter, but, he does have speed, and he definitely can carry it around 2 turns. I thought his Louisiana Derby was a big run.
Oh, definitely. And we'll get to that. Stayed in for half, which is a great name. That's the horse you were thinking of from the maiden race. And yeah, that form has certainly worked out well. Smashed up that allowance field and then came back and set the pace. And we've talked several times in the call about, you clearly consider Epicenter one of the main competition, if not the outright favorite in the Derby, and has form close up to him now. What do you think tactically you're going to want to do, without giving away the store here, but with Zozos? I mean, is the lead where he wants to be in the Kentucky Derby?
It could be. It could very well be. Or right there off of it. I mean, I kind of envision him getting a Mandaloon trip, maybe. Obviously it depends on the post, but just break running, go forward, and establish some position early. And if he's on the lead, so be it, as long as it's comfortable enough. I mean, I don't really think you see the toward paces you used to in the Derby. Maybe say 10, 15 years ago, and we've talked about this lately with some other people, just now since the point system come in, the pace doesn't seem to be quite as quick as it used to be when they just went off graded earnings, because I think you got a lot of horses that obviously pick up graded earnings throughout the year, maybe even their two-year-old season with the sprint races, where you got the fast pace, the 44s and 45s or whatever they were, where you don't really quite seem to get those paces anymore.
No, that's absolutely right. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I do think Mandaloon is a pretty good model for what could work out for him. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you quickly about the Oaks, where you're sending out Turner Loose in that spot, the Rachel Alexandra winner. How's she been doing? She's been working with Zozos, right?
Yeah, they breathed last weekend, and it was a really, really good move. Listen, it's going to be a big step for her. Rachel was a great race. She got a good trip, maybe a little bit closer to the pace in the Fairgrounds Oaks. Obviously, we're chasing a champion around there that we'll have to face again, and it's a deep group. But, listen, she qualified. She has 50 points, maybe 52, whatever it may be, and she's earned one of the 14 spots. And, look, stranger things have happened. As long as she's doing well, we're going to give her an opportunity. She's deserved it, and we'll see how it goes.
Thank you so much, Brad. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you in your hometown in a couple weeks. Sounds good, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
Shawnee Roy, hello, my friend.
Hello, friend. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited to have you here. It's so good to see your face. Definitely the best looking guest we've had.
There can't be. That's not even a question, I would think.
No.
Maybe I'm just the first one you've had, though, so that could be.
No. I will. We're going to talk Zandon, but I do want, and I'm sure you'll have plenty of opportunities next week with Pete to express your undying love for a different horse. But I wanted you to at least be able to mention it here, and there's a little bit of a connection between the two of them.
I really like Mo Donegal. And really, the only reason that I can split the two is just my figures for the wood came back faster and have come back faster than most of the commercially available figs as well. So that's just an edge that I have to take. But the colts are really, style-wise and ability-wise, they're very similar other than that one last race.
Well, obviously you being based in Lexington and a majority of your horse playing career, you were in an office at Keeneland. I'm sure you've watched a lot of bluegrasses and they've been big parts of your betting days and some of your sad betting days as well, I would imagine. But tell me what you thought of Zandon's performance in the bluegrass.
I thought it was tremendous, really. I thought, I don't think the pace was exactly suited, for his best effort. I don't think the trip was great either. He sort of got shuffled and caught behind things on that far turn, and then just exploded home. So I thought it was a tremendous effort and a great prep race for a race like the Derby.
And from an LP standpoint, your figures focus a lot on late pace. Does he obviously the Mo Donegal one's probably a big one. Is he in the mix? Is he in the mix there at the top with his LP?
Absolutely. They're 1 and 2. Not necessarily, I would, just off of LP, I would probably put Zandon slightly ahead just for consistency. But they both threw huge ones in the Rimson, which really, as 2-year-olds going 9 furlongs to throw, the LPs that they threw, that was the clue to me. Those were the two I wanted to watch coming out of the 2-year-old races, is just uber talented horses. And Zandon is back. He has triple digit late pace for me in all 3 of his route races. And all of them. Well, I guess the Rimson, he got a fairly good setup, but those last 2, he didn't even get good setups and still did it. So he's an extremely talented horse. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, horses like this were just automatic, all in bets in the Derby, because you knew there'd be pace. You knew, stuff would be falling apart around them, and they've got good jockeys and can finish. But, the Derby now, especially this year, the pace is sort of muddled, I would say. So it's that's one small strike against horses with this style. But, these horses, and Zandon in particular, has shown so much ability to overcome adversity, primarily because he can finish races like that he's a prime contender.
And look, I think there's also that kind of silly notion and I think it's starting to basically go away. There's that silly notion about like Chad being this like turf trainer and these turf races. But one thing I will say about his horses when they run on the dirt, they are rateable horses that sit chilly and finish races. And they don't, and even if they have tactical speed, if they can put themselves a little bit closer, they're still responsive. And I think that has a lot to do with how he trains them in the morning. And so although he hasn't won a Kentucky Derby, I do believe his training style fits what it takes to win that race, which is the ability to shut off. Because we always talk about the 1.25 miles. None of them are bred to go 1.25 miles. It's just which ones handle it on the day.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I've started really not totally discounting pedigree and distance and stuff like that, but just focusing on figures to tell me if horses can, quote, get the distance. But I sort of agree with you. I think they can all get the distance. It's just how fast can they get it and how efficiently can they get it. So, I have no question about distance for this horse. I don't know much about his pedigree, to be honest, but his 9 furlong races tell me he can get the distance.
Yeah, I mean, he's an upstart, so it's still to be determined. When it comes to the way you'll kind of approach this race, we know you're interested in Mo Donegal from a figure standpoint and in your own figures that you make. Will you be? I know we kind of both speak the same language. Will Zandon and Mo Donegal be kind of equal presses for you? Will you press a little harder on Mo Donegal? Is there any other kind of A-type press types you'll be using? Maybe a couple B suggestions?
Yeah, to me, this race sort of boils down to like 4 main contenders on the win end. And it's, Taiba, extremely talented, extremely fast, has a lot left to prove. But if he draws the right kind of draw and draws outside, gets to sit outside some other speed or even make an easy lead, then he's, he could easily win this race. Epicenter is another one I think could win. He's tractable, can finish. He finished really nicely in the Louisiana Derby. Actually, he got a perfect trip, but he did it the right way. And then the 2 we've talked about, Zandon and Mo Donegal. Those are the 4 I'm going to sort of concentrate on. I'm going to press Mo Donegal mainly because I think the odds may be better and my figures are better. But it's sort of a value press more than I like the horse that much better than those other ones.
I love it, Sean. I love you. And I'm sure that the listeners of the In the Money Network will get a little bit more Shawnee before it's over. I'm sure Pete's already bothered you.
He has. I shut him down the other day. I couldn't do a keynote talk, but I'm in for Derby stuff.
Hey, and I'll be honest. I'll tell you what happened. I said, "Hey, Pete, I'm going to try to get Sean for Zandon." And he's like, I was like, "Did you use him for something else?" He's like, "No, Sean shut me down like 10 times in a row. So I just figured he didn't want to do it."
Pete's he's a lot to take at times. You can't just hop on there anytime he comes calling.
All right. Love you, buddy. I'll see you soon.
See you, man. Love you too.
Next up on the show, happy to welcome in a guest who was meant to be part of last year's Monster Pod festivities, but the horses we picked for her kept scratching, so she ultimately ended up on the cutting room floor, much to the loss of the audience, who always loves to hear from her. She does fantastic work. You've seen her on the NBC coverage, which you'll see once again for this year's Kentucky Derby, amongst other places as well. Britney Ayrton, how are things?
Oh, things are great, Pete. Thanks so much for having me. And yes, what is this about every horse that I come on here to cover gets scratched? Let's hope that's not the case with the horse I'm covering today.
We talked off air about where you were most comfortable going in terms of your Monster Pod appearance this year. You specifically mentioned the Southern California circuit. I'm going to bring up a horse that has some resemblances, at least superficially, to last year's Derby First Past the Post. This is a horse that had some success earlier on, stamped himself as a contender, maybe the bloom a little bit off the rose as we head into the Derby, but has speed, has talent. Tell us what you think about Messier.
Well, and all of those things are very important when we talk the first Saturday in May. And he does kind of resemble, you mentioned Medina Spirit. He also kind of resembles Authentic too, who did not win the Santa Anita Derby and then won the Kentucky Derby. Messier, an incredibly talented horse by Empire Maker. I'm looking at his last race, and I just watched the Santa Anita Derby again, and he broke a little bit flat-footed, and that is not going to be to his benefit come the first Saturday in May. With those 20 horses in the starting gate, we know how important it is to break sharply from the starting gate. So for me, that was a bit of a question mark, but he didn't look completely stable in the starting gate, so maybe it was just a one-off. He got back into stride pretty quickly to sit about a length off of Forbidden Kingdom, and I thought it was an easy enough race, but to be honest, he probably thought, when I say he, Johnny V, the Hall of Famer, that he had got the race won once he passed Forbidden Kingdom. Now we hear, of course, Forbidden Kingdom, unfortunately, not going to the Kentucky Derby with a possible epiglottis issue in that Santa Anita Derby. But here comes Taba, who everyone knew had the talent, but was able to go from that sprint race to the two-turn race in the Santa Anita Derby. And here he comes with all of this momentum. I think it was a very good race for Messier, and I think it was a good prep race, I should say, for the Kentucky Derby, because the biggest dance is the first Saturday in May. It's not the first Saturday of April.
I'm reading between the lines, and I'm hearing that maybe you think in the prep race, the Santa Anita Derby, that John Velasquez had a little bit up his sleeve. Maybe thought the race was won / wasn't too worried once he knew he was going to get a positive finishing position to get him into the Derby. Would you be surprised if we see more out of Messier in the first Saturday in May?
I would not, and I'll correct myself. I think it was the second Saturday of April. Florida Derby was maybe the week before. This is what makes Johnny V so good. He knows exactly what he needs to do to get the job done. He knew that this horse needed points. It's been well documented that the horse was not able to get any Kentucky Derby points when running for Bob Baffert. Now Tim Yakteen was eligible. So he had to finish first or second to make that starting gate. And then obviously with the 40 points, it moves to graded stakes earnings. So when Johnny knew he was beat, why wouldn't you wrap up on the horse? You're not going to keep riding him to get a smaller margin of defeat, I guess you would say. I was watching his body language as he was coming around the turn in the Santa Anita Derby. So he knows he's got Forbidden Kingdom beat. And so he starts riding to the finish, Messier, and then looks under his arm, and here comes Mike Smith. Mike has the momentum. So for me, it did look like the perfect prep race. And what I really like about Messier is his beautiful stride once he gets into rhythm. And might take him a bit, but if he breaks sharper in the Kentucky Derby, the distance is going to be no issue for him. And he'll be forwardly placed, which, as we know, in the past, 7 or 8 years, the Kentucky Derby winners have come in that first flight. It's really hard for a deep closer to win.
It really is. Looking back from 2014 on, the furthest back you're looking at is you'd barely even call them a stalker, really pressing type horses. Right. And of course, the last 3 years, first past the post, absolutely leading gate to wire. All right. So with this all in mind, looking at the pace figures Messier's been running, and noting that he might even be able to get out there with more alacrity, with more with a better push off out of the gate, could he actually be the leader in the race?
I don't think so. to be honest. I think there are other horses that are just naturally quicker from the gate, but he doesn't need the lead. I mean, I've got his past performances in front of me. If some of his best races have come from sitting just off of the pace. Maybe he's been in a field that's smaller and he can inherit that lead just naturally. But I think there are other faster horses within the race. I was fascinated to not see Taba on the lead, to be honest, or at least see him pushing Forbidden Kingdom, considering he was stretching out from a sprint race. So with the 2 turns underneath his belt, I don't see him being too forwardly placed. My guess would be Epicenter wants to take it to them from the get-go. But that's what makes it fascinating, right? And Zandon to me is a very, very intriguing horse, but he's up against it from a pace standpoint. So I think that's what's going to make this year particularly interesting. We have a lot of really talented horses, none, if I'm being honest, that have totally blown me away. But doesn't that make for a better betting race too?
It's going to be fascinating. One last one for you. You mentioned the other big question Messier is going to have to answer going from the shorter field prep race out to the 20-horse field. Is there anything you see in him on the racetrack that makes you think he'll be either particularly adept or maybe struggle with the transition to a much bigger field?
Well, I like the fact from what I saw in the Santa Anita Derby, his ability to be between horses, his versatility in terms of the pace scenario. So all of those things you want to see when you have a 20-horse starting gate. I've also never really seen him turn a hair. I've covered him a few times. And in terms of the pomp and circumstance that you're going to see with the Kentucky Derby, he strikes me as a fairly mentally mature horse. I don't think he's just going to lose it out there, unlike, say, who's gotten better, but simplification for Antonio Sano. He can get really warm and lose his head a bit. So you want to know that the horse can handle everything that comes with the Kentucky Derby. So all of those things put together, I definitely like. It's a question mark of if he's going to get out of that gate quickly and into the first turn with a good positioning.
Britney, it's always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in Louisville.
Oh, looking forward to seeing you. Thank you so much for having me on here. Always a pleasure, Pete.
The hardest thing is going to be keeping this under 5 minutes, but I would also imagine it's pretty hard to make a figure for a mile and 3/16 race when they run one like once every year.
Yeah, I think this was the third one. So I actually had to rely on a little bit of data that we had, along with using some other tracks that run the distance, like Pimlico, which has a similar layout. So, you do the best you can with it. It's not ideal, but, what else can you do?
Well, Greg, I want to talk a little bit about the pace, but we'll start with an individual who feels likely, and I wanted to get your take if you think the same thing, to find themselves on the front end, and that's Zozos, who was second in the Louisiana Derby.
Yeah, I think he's certainly going to try. I don't know if he will be there. Unfortunately, it's a little too early for me to have our pace projector, but I suspect he's going to be shown a little bit back for the mere fact he just hasn't run all that fast, even though he's been on the lead. So his prospects for me are not very good in this race for that main reason. He's quick, and I suspect they will go for the lead, and I suspect he can run faster than what we've seen him do so far. But it's going to be a whole new ball game come May 7th.
Who do you think at this time is likely? Like you said, the pace projector will be up sooner than later. I actually looked to check. I love how you can on Timeform US. You don't think you can, but you can jump ahead to days, and there's information there more often than not, especially Breeders' Cup time. I think it's very useful. Who do you think will be out on the front end without the comfort of the pace projector yet?
I think it's going to come down to about 3 horses, and one is the real wild card. Is Summer is Tomorrow, the horse that ran second in the UAE Derby, but he's had a really quick pace that day. He's a fast horse. He's got sprinter speed. I used to make pace figures for Maidan. I haven't done it in a while, but I did it really roughly just before coming on the show, and it was pretty quick. So I would suspect he's going to be gunned to the front, because what other chance does he have? Now, whether he's going to make it, I don't know. It's always a little bit of a crapshoot in the Derby. The other horses I think are the main contenders to really go for the front are Messier, the former Bob Baffert horse, who really 2 races back went wire to wire with fast pace figs, fast time. And then last race, he would have been on the front without Forbidden Kingdom, who dropped out, and they were going pretty rapid up front. So he would be one, and the other would be Early Voting, who's been really quick in both of his races. The one turn, I think it was the Gotham at Aqueduct, and then in the Wood as well. They are the two U.S.-based horses who have shown they can run well on the lead and done fast doing so.
So a couple of those you named, like you said, we're not even sure if they're going to run. Do you feel like this and I know we got a long way to go, but your feel today, right, on Thursday, April 21st, do you feel like this is going to be a fastly run early Derby, or do you feel as if this is going to be a Derby that might find itself being a little bit more moderate or slow at this point?
Pretty much the Derby always comes up fast. There's kind of a myth out there that, since the point system came out, it's hurt early speed. But when you look at the times of the races and the track that they've been run over, it hasn't really been true. In a 20-horse field, early position is really important to get. It's a big advantage. And that's why we often see, even though the pace is fast, horses up near the front still win, because all the horses in the back are having to deal with traffic and kickback and going wide, while the speed horses aren't necessarily doing so. So almost always when I sit down to make the figures on that Saturday night, there's going to be a couple red fractions in the early pace. There's been one or two exceptions, but for the most part, it's always quick. It's just a matter of if the closers are good enough and if they can get a clean run.
Unfortunately, I probably buried the lead for the new people that come to the game at this time of the year and didn't really fully explain what it is that you do. But you do make speed figures. But I've always tried to argue and I try to make the point, my elevator pitch when I'm telling people about Timeform US is that they're pace infused. So a horse who does more dirty work on the front end early still has a chance of getting a higher speed figure than a horse that was sitting back and getting a soft trip. Is that pretty close to your elevator pitch as well?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of are a two-dimensional speed figure where something like Bayer or Briss are just giving you a final time rating. We're adding the pace in there. There's others, I would say, like Thoroughgraph is two-dimensional. They don't use pace, but they use ground loss. So they're doing something a little different. But the good thing about our figures is if you don't want that part, you don't have to use it, because we also give you the final time figure. But I personally do think, obviously, it's one of the most valuable parts of our speed figures. I bet lots of horses that wouldn't look very good on final time figures and pay nice prices because of that pace.
So you kind of already led to the fact that you're not crazy about Zozos in this situation. But I think as a figure maker who I respect, I would feel silly if I didn't ask you at this point. Obviously, draw and all these things matter. Who is a couple of horses or a horse who's really grabbed your attention from a Timeform US speed figure standpoint?
It is pretty early, tough to say. And there were some really tough speed figures to make. I guess it was a week and a half ago on the Wood and the Bluegrass. The Bluegrass was run over a track that was, they had rain all week. It was kind of changing. The Wood was a crazy track. So this is a year I don't have, supreme confidence like I normally would in a lot of those numbers. But for right now, I'd probably be leaning towards Mo Donegal, who I thought ran really well, Zandon, and Messier. I don't want to write off Messier. He kind of gives me that Medina Spirit vibe, and that I'm not sure he was 100% cranked up. And he's run two really fast races the last two times out. I'm more against the really lightly raced horses like Zozos, who we're talking about. Him in particular, just because he's never faced a pace like he's going to face here. It's going to be quick, and those are the kind of horses I've learned over the years to try to avoid. And, really, he didn't have any excuse in the Louisiana Derby, but he ran a fine race, but Epicenter dusted him in the end, and he had everything his own way up front. So for me, it would be those three right now, but, who knows in 2 weeks. I'm usually not a guy that handicaps too far ahead. I'll dig in maybe Friday night or Saturday morning and go from there.
I hear you. Well, Craig, I appreciate you taking the time today, and I basically thank you for every other ticket I have ever cashed.
No, hardly. I make the numbers. You make the bets. That's the bigger part of the game.
Thanks so much.
All right. Take it easy, Jonathon.
Next up, a returning guest to the show. I'd read his resume, but it would take the whole segment. He is the national correspondent for the Daily Racing Form. Among the things he covers are the Triple Crown, an Eclipse Award winner, a Hall of Famer, my old colleague and my friend, Jay Privman. How are things?
Outstanding. Good to be with you, Pete.
You are here to talk about a horse that I think in many ways is the most interesting horse, like him or not like him, in this year's Kentucky Derby. I've been saying his name wrong. It's Taiba. When did you first become aware of this horse?
I've actually been aware of him since he was bought as a 2-year-old because he was a very expensive purchase, but I'm very friendly with Gary Young, who is the noted clocker out here, and he has been buying horses for the last couple of years for Zandon Racing Stables, Amir Zandon. So when they bought this horse as a 2-year-old in training for $1.7 million, I knew they were obviously extremely high on the horse, paying that kind of money for him. So I've been following him along for quite a while through his initial training last year, and then he needed time off, and then finally getting to the races in early March.
Was it straightforward for him? I'm guessing not. You pay that kind of money at a 2-year-old in training scale. Typically, it's because this is a horse that's fast. This is a horse that's ready to win as a 2-year-old. What's the story as far as what happened with him last season?
Yeah, he went right on with his training after he came into California and had maybe 8 or 9 breezes before they had to stop on him. And he was intended for a debut last summer at Del Mar, but that obviously went by the wayside, and he was off the track for about, 4 months or so before he went back into training. And then after that was when he got into a steady work pattern anew and didn't have any hiccups leading up to his debut on the undercard of Santa Anita Handicap Day.
How impressed were you by that performance? It certainly came back fast on the clock.
The first performance?
The first performance. The main.
Yeah, it was pretty special. I mean, he had trained like he was going to be well-meant first time out, as most horses from Baffert's barn are. I mean, they're trained hard prior to their debuts, and they train hard after their debuts too. But he was ready for a big race first time out. And the thing that impressed me the most about his race that day, Pete, is that he seemed to do better as the race went on. It took him a while kind of to find his best stride, but then once he did, the final quarter mile, he lengthened out, and it looked like he was going to like more distance going down the line for sure.
Now, I had the pleasure of hanging out with Amir last year. I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was. We just happened to randomly be in the same area at the Derby and got to talking, and he seems like a nice guy. So this next comment, not directed at him, but I will say this: in my days as a horse player, Jay, one of the things that I love more than anything else to bet against is when the owner picks the spot and not the trainer. Now, due to your excellent reporting in DRF, we did get to see that this was not the grand plan for Taiba to go into a grade 1 in his second start. Tell us from what you understand how exactly that all went down.
Well, as you know, this horse and several others were transferred to other trainers, specifically in the case of Taiba to Tim Yakteen. And Tim Yakteen advised Mr. Zandon that he thought running in the Santa Anita Derby in his second start, going 1 1/8 miles against seasoned horses like Messier and Forbidden Kingdom, was not in his best long-term interest and was going to be a difficult challenge. Gary Young told him the exact same thing, that they thought this was just too much too soon for a horse who obviously has quite a bit of quality. And Amir Zandon took all that under advisement and said, we're running. And like you, I was of the opinion that the people closest to the horse probably would know better. And I was against him on Saturday, but boy, he was terrific in the Santa Anita Derby.
How would you characterize the effort?
It was fantastic. I fully expected him to make a run at Messier and Forbidden Kingdom, and obviously Forbidden Kingdom wasn't at his best, and he gave it up well before the quarter pole. But when Taiba made that move at Messier on the far turn, I figured, okay, he's going to make his run, and now the step up in class is going to get to him, and all that he's being asked to do is going to get to him, and he'll fade here and finish a nice distance second, good try, good effort, but Messier is just a better horse. Nope, he just kept coming. And in fact, the final furlong was drawing away from Messier and won his best. It was a tremendous accomplishment and a powerhouse performance.
So now we sit at a crossroads with this horse. On one hand, if we're worried that the last race was too much too soon, what are we supposed to think about the even sterner test in the Derby? On the other hand, and we say this sometimes on the show, when a horse what we say on the show is runs through a stat, a horse wins for a trainer who's 0 for 50 with first time started. When they do something that I don't expect them to do, sometimes I'm tempted to give them actually extra credit going forward. What do we do with Taiba from here?
Well, I think what he did was an incredible achievement, and obviously he's going to take a lot of money on Derby Day. He's got buyer speed figures that are the equivalent of Epicenter, who's run the fastest numbers of this crop so far. But I'm going to be against him on Derby Day, Pete. I just think it's asking a lot again. And granted, I was wrong in the Santa Anita Derby, thinking he was being asked too much too soon. And I'm going to basically double down on it for the Kentucky Derby. But the Santa Anita Derby, I thought, if he was going to succeed, it couldn't have played out better for him because Forbidden Kingdom didn't show up. And Taiba had a pretty soft trip, a small 6-horse field where he was able to sit outside in the clear, not have to take any dirt, and then make a run at Messier. Now, granted, Messier is an accomplished horse, and to beat him on the square like he did is really an incredible achievement. That said, now we're going to go to Churchill Downs, where he's going to be in a 20-horse field. He didn't really break super sharply in the Santa Anita Derby. And if he is off even a smidgen slow in the Kentucky Derby, or if he doesn't get that same sort of stalking outside trip like he did in the Santa Anita Derby, I think it's going to be a much tougher challenge for him. And considering his price, he's going to be one of the top choices in the race. And that's the other big factor, I think, in how to approach him. I'm not going to be backing him. If he's 15 or 20 to 1, that's different, but he's not going to be that.
Now, as you're talking, a thought occurs to me that more than most horses, I'm going to be very interested to see where Taiba draws. And I'm not going to want anything to do with him in the 1 through, 6. But if he draws outside and he sneaks up to, he won't be that 15s, but maybe 8, maybe 10, depending on what they do. It's such a hard race to guess how they're going to bet. Maybe a little bit more appealing in that scenario?
Maybe, but I realize we're a ways out from the race right now, but I just can't see him floating into the double-digit range at all. He's run 2 tremendous races with strong speed figures on any way that you look at it, including obviously the buyer figures in daily racing form. So I don't anticipate him being an overlay or an attractive, for my purposes, in terms of what a fair price would be on him in this race. I don't anticipate him being that.
Last question for you, and we'll tiptoe into the waters of controversy a little bit here, maybe with this one. But for me, at this point, doesn't matter. The trainer says Baffert, the trainer says Yakteen. I'm not concerned. I'm just evaluating this horse on his form. Would you like him any more or less if the trainer said Baffert rather than Yakteen when it comes to Kentucky Derby Day, or if we decided this doesn't really matter?
For me, with this horse, it doesn't really matter. I wouldn't care who's training him. I just think it's asking a lot because of going, as I was just saying, from a 6-horse field where he had a relatively soft trip to a 20-horse field where it's unlikely he's going to get the same kind of trip. I think Tim Yakteen's kind of in a no-win situation here, taking over not only this horse, but Messier, because if they do well, it's like, well, they should do well. And if they don't do well, it's like, well, they're not trained by Baffert anymore. It's a tough spot to be in. I think he's handled everything professionally to this point, and he will continue to do so because that's the kind of person that he is. But to answer your question, it wouldn't matter to me who's training this horse. I just think based on what his price is going to be compared to what his chances I think will be, he's a horse that I've got to try and beat.
One thing's for sure, as you noted in your article on the pages of Daily Racing Form, this time I don't think anybody's going to be trying to argue the owner out of putting him in the gate, correct?
No, I think they're all in now.
All right, I'm here in the Brooklyn bunker. Jay's out in California in what he calls the Del Mar dungeon. Great to speak with you, my friend.
Thanks, Pete, for having me on.
Acacia, Clement. I know that's wrong. We'll fix it. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm still getting used to it as well. But luckily, I don't need to change my initials, so anything that's monogrammed is good. So we're in good shape.
How hard was the process of changing your Twitter handle? Harder to do that or to change your driver's license?
I'm currently in the process of changing all my legal items. So I'm actually going to the DMV today. So I will follow up on that point. So it's like you have to go through Social Security, then the DMV, then your passport. So there's a lot, and I'm like, people do this all the time. I don't know why it's so tough. Yeah, it took some getting used to. It was actually a pretty quick change on Twitter. Instagram was a little feisty about it because I changed my handle and then I just went to put Acacia Courtney as my name, and it said you can't change your name twice in 2 weeks. I said I've literally not changed my name since I created this account when I was in college. So it made me sit like a 2-week waiting period before I was able to change it on Instagram.
Wow, that's well, luckily I don't have to change mine. I don't think.
Yeah, guys have it easy, truly.
Yeah. Well, we brought you here to talk a little bit about a horse that I think you're pretty familiar with. And I think it's being in Florida at Gulfstream Park throughout these kind of Derby preps and even some of these maiden breakers and allowance races, you get to kind of see these horses progress. You get to see them from kind of start to finish, and Simplification as a horse that you have had a chance to see from start to finish. What are your overall feelings of him as a horse?
Well, I think he's a really honest horse. I think that he's one that's shown up every time, and he's one that's overcome some adversity in his trips. He really, in his last 3 races and all those big Derby trips, has not had a smooth trip yet. So he's a horse that you have to like. You have to like his trainer, Antonio Sano. We heard a lot about him a couple years ago when Guinevere was on the Derby trail, a horse that took them around the world. And he said he was really kind of following a similar path with Simplification as he was with Guinevere. They're 2 very, very different horses, but it's cool because he is a rather lower profile by standards of the Kentucky Derby trainer. He typically claims a lot of horses, has a lot of Florida breds. This is a Florida bred, and to have a horse like this be a graded stakes winner for him and take him to places like the Kentucky Derby, he and his family are such great people, so it's easy to root for them. But he's a quirky horse, and I think he has progressed, and I'm curious to see how he's going to progress still going on to the Derby.
And one of the biggest questions we talk about, and we hear it very often around this time of the year, is the distance. And obviously these horses will be all going 1.25 miles for the first time. And I would think that a majority of them, outside of a horse like maybe Epicenter, who went the 1 mile and 3/16, the question's kind of still out there. Looking at him in the flesh, and obviously you and our Maggie Wolfendale are so talented in that arena of being able to kind of look at these horses and have some ideas of what they do and don't want to do. Do you get the impression that Simplification wants to go 1.25 miles?
I don't think it's his preferred distance, but I think that he could handle it, if that makes sense. I don't think it's the distance that we would potentially see the horse flourish. I mentioned he's a little quirky. He has the tendency to hang on his inside lead. We've seen him a couple times not switch leads. He's one that gets a little bit revved up prior to his races. Those are horses that don't really take too kindly to more distance because they tend to expend a lot more energy before the race even starts. If you look at in the Florida Derby, they showed a walkover shot of him coming over, and he looks like he was ready to jump out of his skin. He's saddled away from everybody else, accompanied by the pony. And for going 1.25 miles, going 1.1 miles in the Florida Derby was a little bit of a concern with him, given how much energy he was expending. You want a horse that's going to be efficient in everything that they do to conserve. So that's a little bit of the concern. Physically and on pedigree, you would say he probably would be able to handle it. But again, I just don't know if that's really the space that he would flourish.
Now, did that behavior, was that kind of unique to the Florida Derby, or is that something you had seen from him prior, kind of getting a little bit hyped up prior to the race?
No, that's typical of him. That's something I've seen from him every race, and I know it's something that they've worked on quite a bit. And actually, Guinevere was a little bit that way as well. But Guinevere was a decided deep closer in that he would always lag at the back and then come late. So he actually had a lot of time in the race to conserve his energy. Whereas Simplification, they kind of accidentally found out that he could come from off the pace, but he also has a lot of natural speed. And I think that we saw him break slowly because he was distracted, because he was really not focused in the gate. He was not really settled. Whereas prior, we've seen him jump off and go and use that speed to his advantage. So I think he's one that can be in the game a little bit more. But again, that conservation of energy, especially when you think about the Kentucky Derby, the giant crowds, the walkover scene, everything that he's going to have to overcome. It's a lot for a young horse mentally.
So I always upgrade horses when it comes to the Derby that can be tactical, that can be close. We know that race is often won by horses that are leading or close in the first three at the eighth pole when they turn for home. Ultimately, as someone who's got to see this horse, do you think Simplification has a chance to win the Derby? And where do you kind of find him falling? You think he's kind of a used type, a win contender, or unfortunately, you'll have to be rooting for someone else?
Well, I would love to see him do well. Just as far as comparing horses, to be quite frank, coming out of the Florida Derby with some of the other ones that I've seen, I think the only one of the top three in the Florida Derby I would really want going forward would be Charge It, because I think that he kind of just has more blue sky. He's really lightly raced. Simplification, I think, is a talented runner. And I think a lot of people dismissed a horse like Gonavera, who hit the top three, top four in some huge races. And that very well could be the case for Simplification. But I just kind of feel that he's still developing. And there are some other horses like Epicenter, like Zandon, even Mo Donegal, who, yes, finished behind Simplification, but was inhibited by the confirmation of the racetrack that day. I think those are horses that are really trending in the right direction, and Simplification would need to take a little bit of a jump forward to catch those.
Well, anyone who has an ice cream stand truck at their wedding is upgraded on my friend list. I appreciate you taking the time. AC. I'm just going to go with AC.
Yeah,
I've been doing that. I think I'm going to stay safe in that arena.
We could do that. We'll just go by our initials exclusively from here on out, you and I.
Thanks so much. I'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Coming on the show now, gosh, is it for the first time? If so, I'm just going to call that a host fail right now by me for not having had him earlier. You know him from his work on the Churchill Downs simulcast feed, also the Fairgrounds simulcast feed. That's why I thought of him for this assignment to talk about Pioneer of Medina. Here is Joe Christopher. Joe, how are things?
All's well, Pete. As you well know, a busy time of year, going to get even busier next week and as we get closer to Derby, but this is why we do what we do. So enjoying every minute of it.
So Pioneer of Medina right now would be the first also eligible, but there's a lot of talk about early voting, perhaps passing the race to go to the Preakness instead. A lot of other things can happen between now and then. It feels kind of likely, at least, 50-50-ish, that this horse is going to get into the race. If he does he have a chance?
I mean, he's got to turn tables on four good horses that already beat him. I don't see how that's necessarily possible. You're talking about four of the better horses in the Derby this year: Epicenter, Smile Happy, Zozos, and Zandon. So how does he turn tables on those horses? I mean, he's paired threes in his last couple of races on the thoroughgraphs. He's got natural speed from the gate. There's other speed in the race. He does have the advantage, though, Pete, of going a mile and 3/16 at Fairgrounds. And he is progressive, and he is trained by Todd Pletcher. But I just don't envision, because you try to envision scenarios as to how horses can win. There are other horses with his running style that I just think are better than him.
This is a horse who took a little bit of time to get off the mark, certainly progressed slowly before making the jump up into the stakes ranks at Fairgrounds this winter. What did you see in him when you had a chance to see him in the flesh? You talk about him being progressive. How did that progression sort of express itself to you down there?
Well, I talked to Todd Pletcher before this horse ran on Lecomte Day and asked him, because he always brings horses for the undercard on Lecomte Day. And I asked him, do you have a horse for the Risen Star? And he said, well, I'm really hoping Pioneer of Medina can be that horse. He wound up being that horse. He outperformed his odds, finished fourth behind Epicenter that day. Probably the strongest prep of the year, right? I mean, depth-wise with Epicenter, Smile Happy, Zandon, no disgrace in him finishing fourth in his first graded stakes try. And then he pretty much duplicated that effort by running third to Epicenter and Zozos in the Louisiana Derby. Does he have another major step forward in him? I'm not so sure at this point of his career, but what I saw, I liked. Like I said earlier, though, you just like what you saw from a few others better.
Yeah, I mean, he just seemed to be beaten on the square, especially in the Louisiana Derby. And the Risen Star, if you wanted to conjure an excuse, you could say, oh, maybe he was lit up with the bump at the start, and that's why he got tired late or outkicked. But it really seemed like he had a perfect trip for me in the Louisiana Derby. And then you've got those other horses that he's going to have to find a way to turn the tables with. On the plus side, you get a progressive horse in the right hands at what's sure to be an absolutely huge price. What price do you think this horse is going to be on the day?
I mean, he's got to probably be at least 30 to 1. Horses always seem to be lower prices than you think they should be on Derby Day. But the only scenario I can envision him hanging around for a piece of it, you've got the Dubai horse, the summer horse. Why is his name?
Summer of Tomorrow.
Yeah, Summer. Yeah, you got him. I think right now it looks like he's going to show up. I think he's going to go to the lead. You've got Messier, you've got Zozos, you got Epicenter. I don't know what Morello's status is, but these are all horses that want to go forward. The only way I can envision Pioneer and Medina getting a piece of the pie, superfecta kind of horse, is if the pace somehow winds up being reasonably slow up front, and he's part of that. And some of the other closers, like Zozos, like Zandon, and the other Pletcher horse,
Mo Donegal,
get in trouble.
Yeah.
And this horse just hangs around for a piece of it. Not impossible. I'll be using him on my superfecta tickets, but I certainly won't have him on top.
One last question. Of the horses who have beaten Pioneer of Medina, who do you like best? Who do you like out of that group? And would that be I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire for a final selection, but who are you leaning towards as your Derby pick right now?
Yeah, man. I mean, I just think Epicenter and Zandon. I mean, I don't think Epicenter with Rosario aboard is going to be as close to the pace as a lot of other people might think. I think he might be sitting as far back as 5th in this race, but I also think going 1 mile and 3/16 in his natural progression, and then Zandon's turn of foot in the bluegrass was just something to behold. That being said, he's got to try to work out a trip, in a 20-horse field with a horse that, has had a bad habit of breaking a little bit slowly from the gate. I want a horse that's forwardly placed. That seemed to be the winning formula in the Derby for the last several years since the point system came into play.
All right, Joe, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, you got it. Thanks, Pete.
So the gimmick of these shows typically is we get a different guest for each horse, which we basically have stuck to this year. But then this year we did something different where we didn't double up at all for the Derby and the Oaks. But then in the end, we decided we're going to double up for the Derby and the Oaks because you simply can't get enough of TV's Matt Bernier. Matt, how are things?
I feel guilty if I'm the only one doing two. I mean, there are far better options to do double duty than me.
Well, I'll tell you what, we make up for it by giving you a tricky assignment because the horse we're going to talk about in this segment, early voting, may or may not actually be running in the race. Do you have any insight? Do you have an opinion about whether they should try the Derby or maybe wait for a spot like the Preakness?
I think they should wait for the Preakness for a few different reasons. If he were to go in the Kentucky Derby, I don't think the race shape is necessarily ideal for him. There is other speed in the race. Not that this field is loaded with early foot, but I think there's other early speed in here. And I keep going back to, and it was something I thought about right after the Wood. If he couldn't beat Mo Donegal, given those circumstances at Aqueduct, how is he going to do it at a distance that's probably going to be better suited for Mo Donegal at 1.25 miles at Churchill Downs the first Saturday in May? I don't know that I like that sort of recipe, but if you think about it from a Preakness standpoint, if you catch any of the Derby horses on a 2-week turnaround, slightly shorter distance at 1 mile and 3/16, pace scenario could be murky at best. Perhaps he is out there by himself on the front, and we've seen Chad and Klarovich do this thing in the past with cloud computing, sit out the Derby, go on and win the Preakness. So I would totally, again, it's easy for me to say I don't have the horse, but I would bypass the Derby and I'd run the Preakness.
If he goes in the Derby, and I think you've tipped your hand as the answer to this question, presumably that means you don't think he would be able to make the frame, maybe due to the pace scenario you suggested in the Wood early voting was able to make the lead a bit easier than I would have guessed. I guess, Morello not breaking certainly helped with that. It's not like he quit or laid down, but I mean, I think it's a good point that you make about, Mo Donegal had the tougher trip, and Mo Donegal, handled him pretty solidly in the end.
Yeah, and no, it's not at all a knock against early voting, because you're right. He kicked on. It's not as though he came to a crawl. He got run down by a horse that I think is going to relish every bit of added ground. And not that he won't down the road. He's still very lightly raced, keep in mind. He's only run 3 times. But I don't know. I mean, I thought the pace scenario, all things considered, was ideal for early voting in the Wood, and he couldn't hold off Mo Donegal. And look, Mo Donegal got an all-time ride from Rosario, scraping paint and shooting, in, out, and whatever. But I don't know, at a longer distance with some other legitimately early horses, I don't know that I love the setup for early voting in the Derby. Again, the reason I'm more inclined to think the Preakness is because even if you got some of those early types from the Derby that showed up 2 weeks later, they're probably going to have a little bit of the starch taken out of them at that point. And this horse is going to be fresh, ready to go. And again, I mean, I know it's only a 16th of a mile, but mile and 3/16 I think is a great difference than a mile and a quarter, and especially for a horse like this.
I think you make excellent points. We're going to be talking all about the Derby pace scenario in another video, so folks can look for that there. You're obviously on the Oak Show as well, and of course, you've been crushing it over on the Matt Bernier shows. We encourage folks to take advantage of looking there. You can subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel. You can subscribe to the Matt Bernier Show and the In the Money Media feed on iTunes as well. Matt, I'll see you in the other link to do the other video in a minute.
You got it.
Very pleased to be joined on the show now by a returning guest, and a guest to whom I owe a big thank you, because the last time he was on these airwaves, he convinced me to use his horse, White Abarrio, in the Florida Derby. That worked out well. Saffie Joseph Jr., how are things, my friend?
Everything's good, and thanks for having me on.
Congrats on the Gulfstream title. We didn't want to say it when you were on the show the last time. We didn't want to jinx you or anything, but that had to mean something to you.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, to win the title, and after Todd won it for 18 years in a row, he's someone I looked up to. It was a good achievement for the whole team. Everyone's very thankful to be able to achieve the goal.
Let's talk about arguably an even bigger goal, your attempt to win the Kentucky Derby with White Abarrio. You mentioned to us that before the 2 starts back, he'd missed training. You mentioned even before the Florida Derby that he'd missed a day of training, though you didn't sound too worried about it. How much more can this horse improve if things go smoothly between now and the first Saturday in May?
I think there's improvement to come. I mean, he's going to have to improve, obviously, to win a race at the Derby, but I think it's definitely there. The way we've kind of campaigned him, we kind of set it with a 3-race. For the Derby to be his 3rd race, you would hope that would be his best race. And so far, it's gone to plan, and we hope that he can make that another jump. If he could improve another 2 to 3 lengths, which we think is very possible, he's going to be very tough in the Derby.
Have things gone smoothly since the Florida Derby? How did he come out of that race?
Yeah, he came out of the race well, and he had his first work back on Sunday, and that went to plan. Worked probably as good as he's ever worked in his life. Effortless and galloped out. We started back with a 3/8 work. It was in like 34 and 1, and then we wanted a little extended gallop on. He galloped out 47 change out in a minute and 3. So, and the way he did it visually, well in hand, and just flicking his ears back and forth like a horse wanted to do more. So we're very happy where we're at so far. We've got just under 3 weeks to go now, and it's a long time in horse racing terms, but so far so good.
You are no stranger to classic success if we're talking about Barbados. How much would it mean to you, though, to be able to get a win on the USA's biggest racing stage?
Oh, I mean, it would be hard to put into words, basically. I left Barbados with a dream to win the Derby one day. To be in a position to have a chance, it's very thankful to be in this position. It would mean things I can't even put into words, to be honest.
I want to talk about White Abarrio's pedigree for a little bit. We see Into Mischief on the bottom side with we've seen those horses be able to extend to 10 furlongs. Race Day on the top by Tappet. Tappet doesn't actually have a Derby winner, but all those Belmonts, and just a horse that you would think the 1.25 miles would be okay. How does he look to you physically in terms of how far he wants to go, White Abarrio?
Yeah, I mean, until you do things with any horse, whether it be 2 turns or grass or dirt, any of those things, until you really do it, you never know for sure. But ideally, the way he runs and how he relaxes so nice, you would think the 1.25 miles is well within his reach. He's got speed, but he's got controllable speed, and that's very important when you want to get a horse to get a distance. He can rate very kindly, and he's going to be in a forward position once he gets away from there well. And that's the kind of horse you want from the Derby.
What do you expect in terms of the pace? How far back do you think he'll be? He's shown himself to be very, very versatile. He's led gate to wire. He sat right off paces. He stalked and came even from a little bit farther back, starting off 5th in the Florida Derby. Where do you want him to be?
Ideally, you want him to be in the first flight. I mean, I think he's pace adjustable, so if they're going faster, he could sit 3 or 4 of it, and if they're going slow, he could be on the lead or right next to the lead. So he's very he's a very horse. He puts himself in a good spot. People said he's got good trips, but the reason he gets good trips is that he's able to go fast if he needs to, and still have enough to keep going at the end.
That reminds me, Saffie, of something a horse player once told me about horses and trips. He said, you get a lot better trips in a Ferrari than you do in a Yugo. You know, the horse can make their trip, and that's the thing about a push button runner like White Abarrio. So that's got to give you a little bit more confidence as we head into the big day.
No, most definitely. I mean, I agree 100%. When you have the gears and the speed to put yourself in a position, it's very it's much easier to do than when you lack speed.
Saffie, thank you so much for taking time out of a busy day at the sale and chatting with us. Godspeed. We'll see you over there in Louisville.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care.
For all things Oaklawn Park, I go to my man, Clay Sanders. Clay, how are you?
I'm great, JK. How are you doing, my man?
I'm good. I miss you. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever. I feel like we were on a path of seeing each other like every 2 to 3 months. And these last couple of years, it feels like every time I see you, it's like it's been a year.
Yeah, it has. And, we were supposed to meet up at Keeneland a couple of weekends ago. And having a wife that's very into racing and a 5-year-old at the racetrack is very challenging. With Austin, it's hard to get around.
It's hard to move. I want to talk a little bit about a horse that won the Rebel, obviously at Oaklawn Park, and didn't have such a good trip in the Arkansas Derby, to see what you thought about. But what do you think about Un Ojo as an individual? Do you think he's the type of horse that could pick up some pieces in the Derby, or do you think he's probably a cut below?
I think he's a cut below. I mean, there's obviously, this is a horse that had an awful trip in the Arkansas Derby. I think you really can put a line through that race. If you go back and watch at the top of almost on the turn, he got put into the rail. But I think these Arkansas Derby horses, to be perfectly blunt, I wouldn't use any of them on top. If you look at the buyer, they adjusted it up to 92, but anybody that knows Randy Moss, he really doesn't like to move his numbers. I think there was probably some internal pressure there. But the winner of the race gets an 83 unadjusted. To me, that means the whole group is slow. And as you know, there's what Mike Maloney says, there's no trips in slow races. I wouldn't use any of them.
Now, so that's interesting. I kind of agree. I'm not a huge fan of any of the horses exiting that race. But I will say this, from a betting standpoint, we've seen it before. We've seen this kind of the public fall in love with certain storylines. We saw it with Calvin after he had won 3 derbies. Kind of that 4th time he showed up, they overbet his horse. I can't remember the horse's name, but and we saw it with Pants on Fire and Rosie. You get the female rider, you get the funny name in Pants on Fire. We saw it with Patch, obviously a horse that was missing one eye. Do you think we'll see that with Un Ojo being overbet in the Derby?
I kind of think we won't. And I think there's a couple differences here between him and Patch. I think Patch was a little bit more talented horse. He was trained by Todd Pletcher. Easy to get behind a horse trained by Todd Pletcher. He's had so much success. And I just don't think this story has resonated. The name is hard to say when you ask people on Derby Day who they're wanting to bet. I don't think it's going to come to, and I just don't think the story's been as well told. I mean, maybe I'm going to be totally wrong, and NBC spends an hour talking about this one-eyed horse, but I just think he's a little bit more under the radar, and I don't think he's going to get bet. What I will say, he has, I mean, I'm not going to talk about, I think he's going to be a huge price
if he's 80-1, I'm not going to talk anybody off using him underneath. I think Barber Road out of the Arkansas Derby is going to be the one that's kind of the buzzy under horse that people are going to be keying. They're going to be 3 to 4x difference in price. I think they're similar horses. I mean, Un Ojo could have been run second if he didn't get sawed off in the Arkansas Derby, and he finished ahead of Barber Road in the Rebel. So if I'm choosing between the two, I'm going to take the one with a higher price that has probably the equal shot of hitting the board.
Yeah, and obviously the Derby and the Oaks kind of bring out some new fans to watch these videos and to want to learn who to bet in the races. I will say this: it was an accident when he was about a 1-year-old horse. When they're out on the farm, carrying on, running into fences, doing all kinds of things, is how he lost his left eye. And I don't think it's going to make too much of an impact on him does it affect him as his running style? I would think that they like to be inside because they can't see to the left, and being able to see the horses to their right might be a little bit easier than passing on the outside where they can't see what's inside of them.
I think you're spot on, JK. If you go back and watch all his replays, he's always glued to the rail, which I think that's why he's actually done pretty well. He doesn't have to run as good a thoroughgraph rag number because he's glued to that rail. And if you think about in the Derby, being glued to the rail, everyone's trying to avoid it. Maybe he gets a run up and gets a kind of clean trip up on the inside to run 4th or 5th. I could see that happening, and I think you're right about the trip possibilities.
So you've heard it from the Prince of Oaklawn Park. We're tossing all the Arkansas Derby horses.
Yes. Good luck.
All right. See you guys. Thanks.
Right. See ya.
All right. Appreciate it, buddy.
No sweat. Be well.
I'll see you soon. You playing this weekend?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, cool.
Are you on TV? Back on TV off the break?
No, on Friday. Tomorrow I am. And then Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to a wedding, a shower in Connecticut.
Okay.
And then I'm back on full time next weekend.
Yeah. Is this the G's side of the friends?
G's side, yeah. I'm gonna check out her hometown. I've never been.
Cool.
And check out all their like old restaurants and like all this other. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, that'll be great.
All right, man. I'll see you.
All right, take care.
Later. Bye.
Next up, very happy to welcome in a man who hosts what is probably the most popular horse racing podcast in the world. If we're looking at numbers, we have the pleasure of distributing it here in the USA over at InTheMoneyPodcast.com. But you know him from a lot of other places too, including the NBC coverage of the Kentucky Derby. Nick Luck, welcome to the show.
Hey, Pete. Great to be with you.
We have you here to talk about for what many people will be considered more or less of a mystery horse in Crown Pride, winner of the UAE Derby. Is this horse a serious contender for the Kentucky Derby?
I think he's a serious-ish contender for the Kentucky Derby. He's the 4th Japanese trained horse to run in the race. And I went back and, to give me a little context, looked at all the other Kentucky Derbies that have been contested by Japanese horses. Ski Captain, 14th in 1995. Actually not beaten that far in Thunder Gulch's race. Only 7 or 8 lengths, but was right out the back of the TV, turning for home and has run on, plodded on. Lani, the slowest grade 1 horse ever. I mean, bless him. 2016. He finished 9th. He wasn't beaten that far, but he was a furlong behind halfway down the back. And you're getting the pattern here. Master Fencer, 2019. He gets 3 places closer. He finishes 6th. And he's run with quite a bit of credit in the slop in the infamous Maximum Security Country House year, and has somehow managed to finish off a race. Now, given that we all know, and much of the narrative in this podcast is going to be that horses don't come from off the pace in Kentucky Derbies anymore, that was a serious effort from Master Fencer. I think Crown Pride is more credentialed than that horse was, and I think he's more credentialed than Lani was. He's won a UAE Derby, not simply by being a horse picking up the pieces off an electric early gallop, but being attendant to what was a borderline suicidal early pace. And although he's not beaten a tremendously talented field, he's beaten a lot of horses. He's beaten 15 horses going too fast. So we know he's tough enough and he's hard enough. And he's probably had a better preparation than his 3 previous compatriots. In a year that we think is opaque, in a year where We're not quite sure who the absolute standout is in the race. And given Japan's extraordinary success on the international stage since the Breeders' Cup, 2 wins at Breeders' Cup, 4 wins in Saudi Arabia, 5 wins on Dubai World Cup night, surely this horse, with Christophe Lemaire aboard, is at least worthy of some respect.
It is a different animal, I have to say, the success the Japanese have had around the world than a race like the Kentucky Derby. And for me, what it comes down to is the way they train and the way they train horses earlier in their career. You mentioned the previous runners and how far back they were. That's not an accident. I mean, they run far. They're trained for real stamina. The Kentucky Derby, we see just from the bloodlines that have won the race over the last 10 years, it's much more speed horses that they just get to stretch out as opposed to true stamina pedigrees. So I would be pretty surprised to see this horse be able to crack the top 2. But reading between the lines of what you're saying, if we get a pace in here, which I don't think is impossible, and the more we promote the narrative of it's always speed horses, the more maybe we can help jockeys and their agents think about setting more of a fast pace. Feels like a horse that definitely should not be ruled out for 3rd and 4th. And I think that's the way I'm going to play it. What do you think of that approach?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think he's a horse who could finish exactly there, 3rd or 4th. He's not a sort of, I don't think he's going to be closing from the deep, but I don't think he's quick enough to lead or be, in the first 3 early on. But I do think he could sit closer than any of those horses did in the past from Japan. And you could look at his profile. The first 2 runs he had in his homeland, he was right up there on the pace. He was almost a bit too keen. He travelled very well in his next start, but he was squeezed at the start, and therefore never really had a chance after that. He was always on the back foot. It was on an off track as well, so that would be a bit of a worry if it was an off track. And then last time in the UAE Derby, he travelled well. He moved well through the race. Couple of interesting things. There's a big positive jockey up switch. Christophe Lemaire takes over from Damien Lane. I think that's a big positive. He had to go wide in the UAE Derby, although the overall time was slow and he didn't post anything flash in terms of the sectionals. As I say, he's a horse who attended a very sharp early gallop, and his jockey didn't get him to change leads down the lane. So if Lemaire can ride him, with all his international guile and experience, get him to change leads and finish off, then I think he's a horse who could run quite a big race.
The time figure from the UAE Derby, one of the most interesting puzzles. It should be in a book to study for figure makers, as far as I'm concerned, but because it's such a hard place to make figures with the way the atmospheric conditions change from the beginning of that card to the end of that card. In another interview, we had Michael Adolphson talking about how the bias seemed to change on the night, going from a rail that seemed excellent to a rail that seemed like maybe it wasn't the place to be. And you can just see, looking at the times the horses ran, they don't make a whole lot of sense. The various digging I've done, if you made me guess a time figure the Crown Pride ran in the UAE Derby, I'd say it was probably around a 92 buyer. I mean, there's a lot of guesswork in that. It's not wildly off what one would need. And then, of course, you have the other question. Originally, I was thinking, okay, if it was a good rail Dubai, maybe you do want to upgrade him for being wide on both turns. But as the track was apparently changing through the course of the night, I don't know if that's healthy or not. But does that hypothesis sound about right on the buyer scale, that was maybe a low 90s effort?
I don't think the form's brilliant, but as I say, there were a lot of horses in the race. He's beaten 15 rivals. It was an unusually big field. And as I say, I don't think anything's really gone right for him. He didn't really get a draft into the race. He was very wide. He sort of had to make his move into a quickening tempo, and then the pace started to collapse around him. And he was, I think a lot went suboptimally for him in the UAE Derby. Yet he managed to win the race and do it quite comfortably. So as I say, I think he's a horse with enough conditioning now to be worthy of some respect. And you just feel that every time now Japanese horses go abroad, they're just knowing that little bit more. It's not an accident they've gone 14th, 9th, 6th in this race. Right. That's the most unscientific reason for why this horse should run well. But, back it up with what they did in the Breeders' Cup. Marshall Lorraine was completely unfancied by everybody in Japan, let alone anyone in America. And then in Saudi Arabia, and then in Dubai. And the breadth of trainers and owners and breeders represented by those horses as well. It's not as though it's just one. It's not like Wesley Ward at Ascot or Charlie Appleby at the Breeders' Cup or whatever. It's a huge breadth of trainers, because no one barn can have more than a certain amount of horses in Japan. So the strength they've got and the depth that they've got and the breadth of talent across an enormous spread of people is pretty striking now. And I think they should be any horse coming out of Japan in any big race around the world now has to strike fear into the hearts of any of the locals.
It's a fair point. Last question. What price do you think this horse will be on the day? Is there any chance the Japanese narrative takes over and in a open looking year, this horse becomes fancied and bet down, or are we looking at a 30-40 to 1 shot?
Don't you think that US horse players, particularly in this race of all races, are still amongst the most parochial in this regard?
It makes sense. It definitely makes sense, especially because a lot of people betting on this race don't know what happened at the Breeders' Cup, let alone in Saudi or Dubai.
And it's not the Breeders' Cup either.
Right.
And also there's still something of a delayed reaction, isn't there? It takes people a while to cotton on. I mean, people are still betting Aidan O'Brien horses at the Breeders' Cup thinking that it's 2001 or whatever, or 2002, even though statistically now his chances of training winners are there. I mean, anyway, we won't go into all that, but you know what I mean. So I still think this horse will be a big price.
It's going to be fascinating to see how he gets on.
He'll be 30 to 1, won't he?
30, you think?
What do you think?
Yeah, I think a little less than that. I think if you made me guess, I think there's going to be, depending on, it also just depends on what narratives go mainstream. But I could see, I'm going to take the under on 30, but I would take the over on 20. So, we're not far off.
I'm not a million miles away.
Yeah, no. I mean, percentage wise, there's not much, there's a 1% difference between 25 and 30. But I look forward to seeing you out there, my friend. We'll see how this one plays out, and have an easy trip over.
Thanks a lot, Pete. Can't wait. Look forward to it as always.
Next up on the show, very happy to welcome back another one of our very popular guests whose work you're doubtless familiar with from ESPN and other places. Chris Felica, what's going on, man?
No, not much. Just gearing up for what's been a fun couple of weeks with the draft and then the Kentucky Derby. So right after the Masters and the NCAA tournament, spring is here, and we are happier for it.
Have you ever had a bet on the NFL draft?
Yes, I have.
Are they interesting markets?
No, they're very interesting markets because it's a difficult market for people to price, because you're really basing it on the same type of information that everyone else has access to. It's based on what the Daniel Jeremiah, Todd McShay, Noel Kiper, all of those mock drafts. So it's a market that a lot of books are not overly thrilled at booking because the edge that they have is minimal, if not non-existent. But if you find a mock that you trust, or if you have information from just a contact that you might have, or it's a market that you certainly can come out ahead on. It's been a great conversation that the VSiN types have had, especially Gil Alexander and Chris Andrews, about booking it. Chris hates to book it. He's like, he always jokes with Gil about we have to pay for your spring home in the Mediterranean is a joke, but like Chris knows that it's a very difficult market for them to have. And Gil's point is, why don't you just book it as a market that maybe you're going to lose, but at the same time you're bringing in people to place action and have other action where they're probably going to get anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can't resist the football question with you here, but of course, we're here to talk about horse racing, specifically Smile Happy. Now, this is a horse that I think is a little bit interesting. I like the handiness he showed last time. I can't tell you exactly why he's supposed to beat Zandon, who beat him on the square with the tougher trip last time, but at a big enough price, I'd get involved. You sounded a little bit less interested than I did when we talked about him off air. Give me your overall.
I mean, he's got positives and he has negatives. The positives obviously are He had a great 2-year-old campaign. He was well bet in both instances. He won a grade 2 over this track easily over Classic Causeway, who's gone on to have done some nice things as a 3-year-old, and White Abarrio as well, who has a very nice 3-year-old campaign as well. So like if you just were handicapping it on the 2-year-old form, you'd be pretty happy with that. I mean, one of the things that I like looking for in a Kentucky Derby horse is a horse that maybe they haven't won over the Churchill Downs surface, but maybe they have run over the Churchill Downs surface, and maybe they've run really well. So he has that. But at the same time, I'll forgive him for the Risen Star, the first start, awful layoff. There really wasn't a big pace there, and Epperson just it sounded like I was going to say EpiPen. I don't know why I had that on my mind, but that was a really bad New York type accent coming in there. But he was favored in both races, and you can't really forgive him. Can't really blame him for getting beat by Epicenter there. But I was a little concerned with the race in the Bluegrass. Like he was, the way Zandon went by him, you would have to assume that Zandon and a couple of others maybe in there are just better than him. So I'm not going to fault anybody that likes Smile Happy or wants to use him maybe second or third or fourth in the exotics and the supers and tries, because he'll probably be a fairly decent price in this race. And I think the way that he will be ridden it from off the pace is he can pick up a couple of pieces late. I don't think he can win. I wouldn't use him to win, but I do think the running style suggests that he could, if he gets a better timed run than a freak like Zandon going by him, he could get a piece of the exotics.
I did like the fact that he was much handier running a bit, certainly significantly faster pace figures last time while still maintaining that final time. So I guess you could conjure a case that he's ready to move forward off that effort. But I am a little worried. I think you made one of the key points about him, which is he doesn't really feel like he's necessarily developed that much from the 2-year-old form that we saw. So I guess that's one of the decisions we have to make. I guess the other thing I think is a little interesting is maybe he gets lost in the betting, but I say that, but then, Mattress Mac in the news, and who knows what narratives are going to take hold Derby weekend, what it's going to do to the prices. I mean, I'll never get over the betting on my boy Jack as long as I live. It's not always easy to predict what narratives, where they're going to come from, and then what effect that's going to have on the tote board.
No, you brought up a great point about Mattress Mac and the being said by everyone happy. Like that is a major thing. Who's to know? You and I right now talking, like, is he going to come in and drop a whatever $1 million bet on his horse to win, or is he going to be who will be the trendy horse? Just bet on name recognition, like my boy Jack, because like you said, this is not a, I don't want to say sharp betting market. This is a very public, touristy Derby weekend, casual better. You've got husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends and people betting on races that normally don't. And they're going to bet on a horse because of a name or a silk color or a post position number. So you never know where money might come in to affect the market. Like a couple of years ago, Country House never should have been the price that he was on the board, and I was fortunate, and he got put up by a DQ. But there were horses in that race that had no chance of winning, like zero based on form, that were shorter than Country House. So a lot of times the best thing to do, and that's what I will do actually on Derby Day when I handicap. I'll have my opinion going into the day when I handicap the card, and then I'll look at the board again and be like, okay, who are the overlays here? What am I missing something? Is the public missing something? Why is this horse getting bet? I don't like him. Am I missing something here? Because a lot of times that's where you'll be able to get, maybe for lack of a better word, a saver bet, and that might actually be the one that actually winds up coming in.
We've talked about that before, that you believe just as there are public teams in football, public horses, nowhere is, and public connections, nowhere is that more correct than the Kentucky Derby. And then you're right, you add in this even more touristy straight out of the old days element with the Kentucky Derby. I mean, I've heard people say, like back in the day at Belmont, when there'd be 30,000 people on Belmont on a Wednesday, any horse with Irish in the name, you could pretty much count on being an underlay. We don't see that too much anymore. We do see it on Derby Day. And then some of it is some of it's harder to identify than that, because it's just what story takes hold and then gets pushed out in national media, or just totally goes viral on social and can control a narrative. So we'll see. And yeah, I mean, and just to clarify, I realize what I said maybe made it sound like Mattress Mac owned the horse. He owns the sire, as you point out, Run Happy. And I could still see him in some sort of bold bid to promote his horse.
Promote his brand? No, he never does that.
Doesn't necessarily have to own the beast to get involved, as he's shown us with the Astros. But so you also mentioned something I thought was interesting about you use a bit of a process of elimination for handicapping in general, and particularly a race like the Derby. What has that process of elimination led you to at this early stage? Not holding your feet to the fire for a final answer, but who are you zeroing in on that you have a bit more interest in?
The way I'm kind of attacking this race right now is I don't necessarily have a Derby horse per se in terms of winning. I think the questions I'm still asking myself are, how are the Baffert runners going to be handled and handicapped and treated? Are they going to be handled as still Bob Baffert trained horses, or are they going to be handled and handicapped as Tim Yakteen horses? I think that is a major question in the race. I think there's been almost so much talk about Taiba that is him being in his third race. Like he's an absolute bet against. How can you play this horse in a 20-horse field off of 2 lifetime starts? Like, is it going to reach a point where, like I was talking about checking the board about 45 minutes before the race, where maybe he is an overlay because it's almost too contrarian to just bet against him, and maybe there is some value with him. So the one thing that I think I have settled on right now, and I've mentioned Zandon's name, I don't know if he will win, but I feel pretty good about him running his race and finishing in the money. So I think right now, how I plan on betting the race is kind of using Zandon as like a key in like tries and exactas and triples, and put him in a spot where if he hits the board, I'm going to be in a pretty good spot with a lot of coverage on top to ultimately win the race, to ultimately win my wager. I think Cyberknife is a horse that is going to get a little bit of a wise guy type play. And look, there were a lot of eyebrows raised off of his race in Arkansas, but at the same time, you kind of go back through his past performances and you can kind of like say, okay, that it was a natural progression. Like throwing him in the stakes race off of a maiden win, that's not necessarily a spot where you're going to have success. And then they put him in an optional and got his confidence back. And then he ran unbelievable in the Arkansas Derby. And now blowing away Barber Road and beating Secret O's. There's some nice horses in there. But I think, again, is there going to be a narrative we mentioned about Bob Baffert before? Like, is there going to be a Brad Cox narrative about, okay, he should have been the winner last year. He got robbed. He got it by default now. Is he actually going to win it for real this year? So all these really interesting narratives and storylines, like we were talking about, really do affect the public sentiment and the wagering on the race.
Looking forward to seeing you down there, my friend. Chris,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Mig, I miss you.
Miss you too, JK.
I'll see you soon. Hey, I wanted to get you on to talk about this horse specifically, because I know there was a lot of questions about Morello and his ability to get the distance. He also had a little bit of a trip last time, and I know you've seen him in the flesh. So first off, what do you think about Morello as it pertains to him getting the distance?
Well, I from a physical perspective, I have a little bit of trouble seeing him 1 mile and a quarter. I think he's a very talented young horse, did a lot in a very short period of time. Forgive him, his Wood Memorial completely blew the break against much tougher than he had faced, then tried to middle move. That never works. So I put a line through that. But looking at him from a physical perspective, I have a hard time seeing him want a lot more ground. The one thing that makes him an overachiever is he looks like a jockey's dream to ride. He just waits on the rider. What do you want me to do? I'll do it, which is kind of interesting being by Classic Empire, who was a little quirky, a little tricky to ride. He's completely opposite. If you want him to do a little more, he does a little more. You want him to relax, he comes back to you. So horses like that will fool you and get more ground just because they do things so properly.
Well, that's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because obviously running in the Kentucky Derby, having a horse that listens to his rider is half the battle of getting the 1.25 miles. Am I wrong or right?
Oh, absolutely right. You don't want a horse that gets too keen, pulls too much, 20 horse field, which the Derby always is. You still want to come out running. And some horses, if you come out running, you've turned them on, you can't turn them back off. When you have a horse that can turn on and off like that, that certainly is a huge advantage for a rider. You know, you can come out, grab your position, then when you put your hands down, he's going to come back to you as opposed to running through the bridle. I like the horse very much. Pedigree-wise, says he should stay the 1.25 miles. Looking at him physically, I don't really get that impression. But I do think that he's a horse that we're going to hear a lot from throughout the year. No horse goes from breaking their maiden and take the steps he took in such a short period of time unless they're very talented. I always go back to this. They knew Mike Tyson was going to be champion of the world one day when he was 15 years old. He still fought 20 pretty easy fights before he stepped up with much stiffer competition. I equate horses to that. They still need that process to either learn, get physically fitter, certainly mentally stronger. So he's very talented. I'm just not sure he's a Kentucky Derby horse.
And so, and we talked about the distance. You've expressed, the pedigree, the fact that he's kind of push button, the physicality of him is your biggest concern. And I learned this from you, and I like to try to throw it in as often as possible. But that 1-turn mile, I've always felt like the 1-turn mile plays much closer to the 1 1/8 miles than it does to a 7 furlong race because of that long stretch where horses don't get to slow down going into the turn. Does that give you just a little bit more confidence, the way that he handled that 1-turn mile, that maybe, just maybe, he could get the 1.25 miles? Or does the physicality of him kind of outweigh that?
Well, it's a great question. Again, I'm a fan of the horse. I look at him and I go, man, I'd like to ride him because he just seems like a horse that, again, I'll go back to it, a jockey's dream. That being said, I'm not seeing a 1.25 miles horse under any circumstances. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. He will not be, if he does run in the Kentucky Derby, he will not be in my top 4.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask you. Is he a use or a toss? It sounds like the MIG is going to toss him right out of that window at Aqueduct, huh?
Well, again, and I don't want to be taken the wrong way. I'm a big fan of the horse, and I do think we're going to hear good things from him. Also, I'm not a huge fan, and in this day and age, it's changed a lot, of lightly raced horses going to the Derby. I just think it's asking a lot to go 1.25 miles that early in their 3-year-old season anyway. I like horses to have more seasoning.
Basically what you're saying is you would take the 5-1 if I offered it right now for this horse to win the Jerkins this summer at Saratoga.
Yeah, actually, that's probably a good line.
All right. Mig, I appreciate you taking the time. I miss you, buddy. Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Look forward to it.
Next up, we have a returning guest whose opinion I'm really eager to get, not just about the horse he's here to speak with about nominally for this segment, but the contingent coming over from Dubai. He is from Dubai Racing TV, from a fantastic Twitter follow over at Adolphson Racing. Michael Adolphson, how are you, my friend?
Doing well. Always glad to be here and chat not only international racing, but especially Derby Week. We have such great racing coming up over there. And I'm in a unique position where we have some horses that I've seen recently run here that are going over.
As recently as this morning, from what I understand. Is that right? Were you there for Summer is Tomorrow's work?
I was. I've been there for his last 2 works since his 2 works period since the UAE Derby. He did one 6 days ago. He did a half mile. It was very, very smart half mile. And today was very impressive. We can get into that later, but it was. Oof, I was not expecting that.
That's interesting. That's very interesting to hear. But as you suggest, I think we should back up first. A lot of people watching this podcast who watch racing a couple of times a year, they're not going to have heard of this horse, Summer is Tomorrow. What can you tell us about him, more generally speaking?
He's well seasoned, and he's kind of like the international product. So he's I think that's a cool aspect of him. He's born in the States. He's an Airdrie bred. Burton C. Jones bred him. He's a son of Summerfront. And basically he was born in the States. and he was sold by a French company in the UK because of COVID. Arcana sold him in the UK at Doncaster last year, and or 2 years ago, he was broke in Ireland. He's trained by an Indian in Dubai. His traveling lad and exercise rider is from South Africa, and he's owned by an Iranian and an Irishman.
That is the best story. I mean, it's one of the stories of the whole Derby, honestly. You want to talk about the internationalization of racing? We've got it right here. What's he done on the racetrack?
In 7 starts, he's very well seasoned. He'd be making his 8th start. His 2 wins have been sprints, but his 7 furlong win 2 back was very impressive. It kind of hinted that he could stretch out a bit, and that's what they did next out in the UAE Derby. Kind of shocked a lot of people. They switched the rider on him to Mikel Barcelona, and if you're not sort of familiar with Mikel, when he rides the dirt, he's extremely good and then very good on the front end. And Mikel Barcelona kind of didn't really set it too slow of a pace. He let him just run and use his speed a bit, and he almost won the race. He almost stole the whole thing at the top of the lane. He kicked on nicely, and he just got caught by a bit of a freight train in Crown Pride, who's just a one pace kind of train that just keeps coming, and got him in the last 150 meters.
Was there a bias in his favor? That was an odd track that day in tonight. You had pointed out that you felt like the inside was definitely going to be good in the hotter, sunnier early part of the card. Yeah. As it went on, did it even out?
It absolutely, I would say it overcorrected. We'll say that. I think it came about this time of day in the UAE Derby. It's the middle of the race day, and it was, right before sundown. It was, I think, absolutely fair and even. Okay. As it got cooler, and the humidity would basically drop, humidity would rise in the evening. I think it held more. It was like strangle holding onto water. Became very tiring, and I think Life is Good got the brunt of it in the big race that day. He's not bred to stay the distance, first of all, but he definitely wasn't done any favors by the track that day.
No, it's one of the wildest that, as a time-oriented person trying to look and make figures for that card, I found it almost impossible to make sense of it. But let's go back. So obviously, there were atmospheric conditions at play. But let's go back to Summer is Tomorrow. My 2 main questions for you before we pivot on to some of the other runners coming over from Dubai. Do we think this horse has a chance to lead in the Kentucky Derby? Do we think this horse has a chance to be anywhere there at the end?
I think it depends on how much pressure he gets. I think that people are right in kind of dismissing him as a winning chance. I think he is good enough and moving in the right direction enough to be top 10 in the race, maybe top 8. He's kind of one of those horses that just has a lot of class to him. And he's really done the only races where anything's gone awry. I think he had some feet issues, things that really weren't in his control. He's a genuine type. I always find it interesting that he's actually bred to be a 9 furlong grass horse. He's out of a full sister to I think was the name Bigger Picture. Won the United Nations a couple years ago in 2019, and he won the Elkhorn, I think, 3 years ago tomorrow. There's a lot of stamina on that bottom side, despite being out of a Badge of Silver mare who was a miler himself, and he's just got a lot of class to him. I think that what you're going to see is a horse that if he breaks, which he should under Mikel's very good out of the gate. He's like the French Paco Lopez, and he'll get him out there. And I think you'll see him. He's quick enough, easily. He's quick enough. He was quicker than Baffert's horse in the UAE Derby. His name is escaping me. He won the Saudi Derby. Pinehurst. He was quicker than he was that day, easily. So he got out there. He's a horse that I think will have the lead, and he'll try to kick on. He's genuine enough that if they give him a breather at all and they don't really inhale him on the turn, he'll try his best to hold on as long as he can. And my hope for my friends who are connected with the horse is that he just has a good showing. He doesn't finish last, and he finishes a good, 8th, 9th, or maybe even picks up a check, and I think 6th or 7th. I don't know how far it pays out, but I do think that he's a horse that if they leave him alone, or if the track comes up wet because he's bred to be a mutter all day long, he's a horse that will last longer than people expect. It just has to go his way, and they're kind of the win players are right to dismiss him.
Tell me a little bit about the workout you saw this morning. It sounded like you were impressed.
I was very impressed. He went out with a horse named Beauchart, who's I would say the equivalent of like a high allowance level older sprint horse. Is a horse that used to be one of the better sprinters in Dubai. Now he's a 7 furlong mile horse as he gets long in the tooth. But he went out there and he was supposed to follow Beauchart. It's really quick, little Dubawi, and he passed him before they got to the bend, basically, and then just opened up on him. And basically, the instructions were go 13, 12, 12, 12, basically 13, 12, 12, 12, and then 2 11s to finish up for the 6 furlongs. And he came home 11 and 6, and then 11 and 4 for his final 2 furlongs. And so that made 23 flat. He went 111 and 4, so 111.8 for the 6 furlongs. It was just very impressive. It's a horse that's really doing well. They gave him, a bit of space out of that last race. And he's come back 2 workouts in 6 days. And he's hinting, all the time that he's doing well. So, that's what you want in a speed horse. You want him to sort of grab a hold of the bit like that and just use his own tools and want to use his own tools. And to me, if he breaks, he's going to be in front. I just don't know anybody else who's going to be hell-bent for the lead, and he is.
That's very interesting. That would be my takeaway. Sharp horse, sprinter speed, feels like one who's going to be a major pace player in a race where there's been a lot of conversation about the pace. We're basically out of time, but I can't let you get out of here without getting a quick thought from you on Crown Pride and whether or not you think he has a chance, and then also Shahama in the Oaks and whether or not she's a serious contender.
I think Crown Pride is a shoo-in to be sort of grinding at the end like he did in the UAE Derby. I think he's going to be along for a 4th, 5th, 6th at best, probably a little bit worse than that because he ran a 14 on the rags last out, and it wasn't that impressive. And I think the best horse in that race didn't run very well, and that was Azure Coast, who kind of boiled over before the race. Shahama can win the Oaks.
Wow.
She's a big price. I think she's really talented. I mean, she's a almost $500,000 half sister to Looking at Lucky. She's a beautiful money. She travels really well. It all depends on how well she shipped over there and how well she's adapted into Pletcher's program. And Pletcher's really good at picking up horses. We've seen this from other barns. So if he thinks she's good enough to run in the race, he's not going to run her unless he can tell the owners we have a shot in this race. And to me, she's a true 9-10 furlong filly. She's going to be humming along at the end. She's going to keep trying. I'm hoping that Audrey DeVries keeps the ride because he's one of the better riders in the world on any surface. And I'd love to see him go over there and finish in the money. But yeah, I think that race is ripe for a big upset because a lot of the big names in it are going to be hammered at the windows.
Michael, fantastic stuff. We hope you're here Derby week. We'll follow the training of these horses, maybe bring you back on for something, maybe on the plus side to just give your thoughts on how the Dubai contingent and others are training heading into the race. Really appreciate your time today.
Glad to help out.
Next up on the show, the person who probably had the single most memorable segment in last year's Derby Monster Pod when she made the case for Medina Spirit. I kind of thought when I talked to her about who she wanted to talk about for this year's Monster Pod, she might go with Messier, who I thought had a little bit of a Medina Spirit type look about it. But no, she has a horse she really likes. She also makes the best faces when I say the names of horses she doesn't fancy. Go back and watch my Derby draft show if you want to see. I've had multiple people send me freeze frames of your face at every pick I made during that Derby draft show. I'm talking, of course, about Michelle Yu. Michelle, how are things?
I'm good, Pete, except Messier. I've never even said one nice thing about him, I don't think.
No, I just thought because of the look, and we're supposed to be talking about Cyberknife, but I just thought, out of the same original trainer, sneaky chance to be best speed, had some old form, disappointed maybe a little for some in the previous. Anyway, whatever. That was just a guess. You love some Cyberknife, and I want to hear about how far back this love affair goes.
Let's see. How far back does it go? So I actually thought he was intriguing coming into the Lecomte Stakes. And then obviously he was beaten. But then I had to go on and start looking at horses that I thought could make a case for a future book odd play. And so I kept coming back to him, knowing that he was going to run in an allowance race and just thinking this horse can be something, right? Because if you go back and you watch his races, I feel like he's got talent. He's just a complete nut job, which I'm okay with. I love a horse that either has
you can relate.
Yes, I like a horse has a major issue or is a head case or doesn't like to do something or, like fell on their face. I mean, I like to have an excuse of some sort. So I looked at him for the futures, and then I knew that going into Arkansas Derby, it was going to either be like I look genius or I look like a moron, but it's completely fine, whatever the case may be. It ended up I looked so smart after that race. So I mean, like now it's just kind of like I'm on his bandwagon because of this whole I had to pick a futures horse.
Well, you got on the right one. You're going to go to the gate. You win a key prep race in the Arkansas Derby. But let's talk a little bit more about that Arkansas Derby. I know the pace was fast, but I didn't love the way this horse came home, either on the clock or just visually. Now, you know a lot more about things like lead changes and lugging in and how a horse is behaving in the stretch. Did you see something from Cyberknife in that Arkansas Derby performance that makes you think he can take the needed step forward in a race like the Kentucky Derby?
Well, I think that we already saw him move forward in the Derby, right? Let's go back and let's walk down the stretch real quick because he does get very green down the lane, and I don't want to misspeak on what exactly he did. So I'm going to fast forward to the lane of the Arkansas Derby that I'm going to watch on my other screen right now.
I'll put him up. People can look at his stats from our crack slide that we have while you take a look at that.
There we go. That's what we like to see. Okay. So when he comes down the lane, he is on the correct lead. So that's good. He just lugs out under left-handed urging multiple times. But for the most part, he still has a relatively straight way about him. I think that he lugs out really bad at the end too. Okay, but he was on the right lead, so that's good. So when you look at his last races, when he has come down the lane before and made contact with horses, he's been the horse that looks at other horses like, oh, what are you doing here? This is strange, and doesn't want to run on past them. So I think that the fact that they got him to the lead early was really good, right? It wasn't going to be a just down the lane situation. I feel like that horse needs time to mentally adjust for what's going on. I think that the early move that Flo made put him in contention for the win, right? When Secret Oath didn't get that early move and they waited, I mean, he just had all the momentum behind him. So he was able to overcome that little bit of greenness at the end. But overall, he stayed pretty straight. He didn't switch his leads back and forth, which is great. I would have liked to, see him level out a bit when he was being whipped. But I think that he's kind of resentful to what the heck is going on still. And that's, again, that mental greenness. I think that you can certainly move forward from that because if you watch all his races, he's been already in a progression mentally. The Cyberknife of 3 races ago, I think when he got to the front and he got hit left-handed, I don't know, would have bolted or just plain flat out stopped. And this horse didn't try and do that. It's getting better.
What price did you get this horse on as a future?
50-1.
Okay, 50. You're certainly getting the value there. At what price would you want to bet him again on Derby Day, or do you think your boots are full at this point?
I mean, right now, I think he was 22-1 or something the last time I looked. And I still think that's a good price because I feel like come Derby Day and you get all these guys that don't know anything about horse racing, right? They're going to go like this. Okay, Brad Cox. I know that guy's name, right? That's what they're going to do. And they're just going to hand over fist, stuff like that. So I do feel like a lot of times you get lower odds than the horse is worth based on the names that their trainers bring in. You know what I mean? So I feel like with Brad being the hometown guy and everything else, and I think if this horse trains well, I think a lot of people are like, well, he wants to win the Derby outright. This could be his year. It doesn't have to be like a fancy horse, like Essential Quality or whatnot. So I think that he'll be lower than the 22-1 you can get him at right now, or I see him at right now. I don't know if I would want to go lower than 6, 8. I mean, at that price, he's getting near favoritism, right? I think that he deserves to be a price horse, but I can see where he goes a little lower, and I'm not hesitant to use him in my tickets at that price.
I think you made a key point about how he trains. And the good news is that you, once again this year, as last year, are going to be part of our Final Answers show that we will stream live Wednesday of Derby week from Lexington, Kentucky.
That
So
is the day after my birthday.
the day which I love, that we'll get to keep the celebration going in Lexington. You still haven't sent me your final choice of restaurant, by the way. We got to work on.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, Dudley's is my number one. I love Dudley's.
Well, we can do that.
I heard that. Wait, didn't David and Gordo open a restaurant? I heard it's good and we should try it.
All right. Well,
something like Dino's or something like that.
Frank and Dino's, is he involved?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, you are the birthday girl, so you get to choose.
Okay.
At that show, you'll get to give us your final answer on how you think Cyberknife has worked coming into this, and we can see if we can figure out our final answer with him and the rest of this Derby field. But we know you're all about the Cyberknife.
Yeah, looking at his works, he's generally like a minute flat workhorse pretty much all the time. And he just worked 3 days ago at Churchill in a minute flat. So like he is right on schedule looking at like his history of works for coming into here. I didn't get to see that work, obviously. I would love to. So maybe I'll be able to find it online. I don't know if they were shooting quite. Yeah, maybe they are. I don't know when they start doing their.
I bet you'll find it. I bet through the
Well, I don't know if they have it like real, but like Kevin might have just videotaped it on his phone and we can watch that. But I do obviously want to see him getting over the surface, which would be good. Although he has race experience over the Churchill surface and they were both decent enough. The key for him is really just going to be like, there's 180,000 people there. How is he going to mentally handle that? You know, like, is there going to be stage fright? Is it going to be like screaming so loud from both sides that he just has to go straight? Like, there's a lot of keys that we can see. I really hope. I don't know if Brad's a big schooler, to be fair. I really hope Brad schools him so that like we can see, unless he's a stupid schooler and then you don't school him. So then it's like a big surprise that day. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I haven't been around the horse. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll find out a little more about him mentally and what he can and can't do. Maybe it's only on the racetrack on race day that he's been silly.
The bigger the price, the less you have to worry about this stuff.
Right.
Last question. What kind of trip do you want him to get?
I want him to have a relatively forwardly placed trip, obviously. I don't want to see him more than like 5 lengths back. I mean, unless there's someone out there, you know, guns a-blazing, but I don't want to see him try and pick up through or around 10, 12 horses. You know what I mean? Like he needs to be the first several. And I want to see the jock move early on him. So none of this wait till the top of the lane crap, right? I don't like that. You got to move early. Like, let's get going, especially because this horse, it looks like you have to keep riding him. There's some horses that like you ask them to go and they give it to you and you don't have to touch them again. And they're just guns a-blazing. I feel like this is a horse that you got to keep like reminding him, hey, by the way, your job's not done yet, dude.
All right. Great stuff, Michelle. Always appreciate your insights. And we look forward to seeing you for the final answer show in Lexington Derby Week.
Sounds great. Thanks, Pete.
Next up on the show, a guest who is always extremely popular when we have him on these airwaves. He was here just a few weeks ago talking about the beginning of the Keeneland meet, and he's here now to talk about Charge It's chances in the Kentucky Derby. He is professional horse player Mike Maloney. Mike, what do you think this horse's chances are?
Pete, for me, Charge It is a use. He's not a key. He's not one of my A-list contenders, but he's a horse that has enough upside that I'm afraid not to include him. He's had 3 starts. I see a nice progression in his races so far. He narrowly lost the maiden race, ran an 83 buyer, came back, broke his maiden with a 93 buyer, then moved into the Florida Derby. Not only moved from a maiden race to a grade 1, but it was his first time around 2 turns. So a big ask, and the horse ran well. You know, in the Florida Derby, I don't think is one of the fastest preps for the Derby this year. Don't think it was one of the deepest preps. So that's a negative for Charge It. But I thought he ran well in there. He, as you would expect from a horse making his 3rd lifetime start and first time around the turns, he looked a little green early in the race, didn't seem real comfortable sitting in the pocket down the backside, and was a lot more interested in running when he was pulled out and kind of produced at the top of the stretch. Being a son of Tappet, I would expect continued improvement. Think the distance, added distance should be fine. In very good hands, training wise. So, a horse that will have to move forward significantly to be a big factor, but judging by his past performance, I can't rule that out, that he might really move forward.
One reason I thought it would be interesting to talk to you in particular about Charge It, there's a few reasons that we'll get to, but one was, I know you've talked about being extra forgiving of horses when they hit the gate early in a race, that in and of itself can be an excuse sometimes, a reason to draw a line through a race and go back and try to judge them off their previous efforts. That happened to Charge It. I'm curious to get your take on how bad you thought it was. But one thing that I liked about him is he fought through that ungainly beginning. And even though he was also green late, as you point out, I just thought he showed a little ability, and you could make a case that he improved even more than it looked like, because he had things not really go his way, and he still put together a good effort in a grade 1 prep, albeit not the most sexy of the ones this year. What did you think the effect of that break had on Charge It's performance last time?
Yeah, it definitely not a positive. So, something that you factor in for me, I've seen a lot worse. It wasn't a real bad incident of a gate issue, but it's a small factor, I guess, in his favor going forward. He's kind of a high-headed horse too, and I always just in the way he runs, and I kind of think of those horses as that just being greenness sometime, and that's another thing pointing to me that there's probably a lot more to this horse than what he's been able to show so far, and he has a very good race record.
That's always an interesting question with a runner like Charge. And on one hand, you can look at those signs of greenness and say, okay, now how's he going to handle it in a race like the Kentucky Derby with 20 other horses and all the inherent challenges? But the other way, and I get the sense that you're seeing a little bit of the upside in this respect, is, hey, if he ran that well and got that figure not doing things right, how's he going to do when he improves and starts, learning a bit, given the hands he's in and given this pedigree, which I'm going to go ahead and say is maybe the most interesting pedigree of any horse in the Derby this year, and one that also suggests better with distance, better with racing. I'm definitely inclined to take the more optimistic of those views. But of course, if he shows that kind of greenness this time around, I mean, you could rip up your ticket, right?
Yeah. And something we haven't mentioned yet, which I don't really know about this particular horse, but I'm sure with all the coverage we'll get leading into the Derby, we'll probably get a clue to this. Mental maturity is a huge factor in the Derby. Horses are going to be put in a situation like nothing that they've ever been through before. Some horses handle it better than others, and it can melt a horse down. And there's a lot of horses that lose their race in the Derby before they ever get in the gate. They wash out or they get fractious, and they're just they're thrown off their game. So Tappets can tend to be high strung and can tend to be difficult sometimes. So I'll pay special attention to what's written in the press and the interviews that are out that might give me a clue as to Charge It's disposition.
We'll try to get an update from you on that before our final answer show, which, as I've mentioned several times, taking place Wednesday of Derby week in Lexington. Not sure if there's any tickets going to be available to the public for that or not. I'll get all the details. We'll post them. But Mike would certainly love an update on your opinion as we get closer, because that is a key point about this runner, and there's a lot more info to dig on. Hopefully he gets some of that class from the dam side of the pedigree and can face the challenge if we're going to be using him on our tickets in the first Saturday in May. Mike, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us today.
Anytime, Pete.
My man, G. Stevens, what's going on?
What up, JK? Everything's good, man. Nice little vacation to set me up for this whole Derby thing,
Are you going to Derby?
I will be there. Yeah, I'll be there.
Well, you spent the winter and early part of the spring in Hot Springs at Oaklawn, so I know you were hustling book and doing the shows and just running around everywhere. I have a feeling you have your finger on the pulse. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Barber Road. I will also talk about some of the other horses in town. But what are your thoughts about Barber Road? Do you think he's the type of horse that can win a Kentucky Derby or at least be involved late?
He's going to be involved late. It looks like to me there is so much speed in this Derby. At least it's going to, and there's always an honest pace in the Derby. And I think it's going to be more than honest this year, JK. The thing that worries me about this horse is trips, the trips he's been getting, and then finding trouble even late in races. And that seems to be his MO this year. And I can't knock him. He's a little bulldog. I love the horse. And, I'm a fan of Johnny Ortiz. He's full of energy. And this horse is, it's a dream come true for him to be running in his first Derby and everything. So it's a great story, young trainer. And it's just kind of blasted onto the scene. I remember this time last year, he was a little frustrated. He was just really starting to get some decent kind of horses and getting a following and stuff. But back to Barber Road, I thought that inside the final furlong, going back, I've watched that stretch run, I don't know how many times, but a lot. And I couldn't understand why he got the leaning in, and even on the chart it says lugged inside the 16th pole, and Ray Lou was getting after him right-handed. So I hope that Ray Lou, and I'm not being critical, but I guess I am. I think that he should have been a clear second. The strength of the Arkansas Derby worries me a little bit, but it really hasn't seemed to matter the competition he's been facing. He's there in the frame, in each and every race since his 2-year-old year. I mean, he broke his maiden in a claiming race, came back, won a starter race, and he hasn't won a race in 2022, and that's of some concern to me. We know those types of horses where you see a couple of wins, but you see a lot of seconds, and you see more seconds and thirds than you do wins. And that form sometimes holds true. And that's the thing that worries me. He is good enough, because the best horse or the best bred horses and stuff don't always win the Kentucky Derby. We've seen horses win the Kentucky Derby that never win another race in their career. I don't think he's one of those types of horses, but I'd like to see, he's going to need a breakthrough race to win the Kentucky Derby, but it's very possible it could happen in the Kentucky Derby, that breakthrough race.
You mentioned, and I've heard a couple people say this as well, and you mentioned that you kind of question or you wonder a little bit about how good this Arkansas Derby is. That's nothing against the Arkansas Derby. It produces runner after runner after runner, but sometimes it just happens. The Florida Derby can be down one year. The Santa Anita Derby can be down one year. Do you feel as if maybe this wasn't the strongest group of 3-year-old colts we've seen exiting Oaklawn?
Listen, I think Cyberknife is a very good colt, and I think he's going to continue to improve. I don't think we've seen the best of him. He's another horse that could really jump forward, but he's been hard to handle at times. And Brad Cox has made it well known that he's a little bit of a mental case, and he put everything together. But as soon as he made the lead, he started wandering around, inside, outside, and Florida. I think even with more competition, it's going to make better competition. It's going to improve Cyberknife. I think I've ridden horses in the past that, got themselves in trouble against cheaper horses because they made the lead too early. Whereas if you're facing better competition, you have a target, and the longer you have a target, the less time they have to think about screwing up. It's like the kid that, is a great athlete, and he's so used to just toying with his competition that he starts slowing down. Let's say it's even a track star. I got this one wrapped up and starts showing off or whatever. He almost reminds me of a show off that. And when you face better competition, you don't have time to show off. You learn a lesson, and he'd been beaten a couple of times that they were disappointed in him, and he showed up on the day of the Arkansas Derby And I don't think that we saw probably even 90% of what he was capable of. And I'm sure Brad's happy with that, because you don't want their best race being the one before the Kentucky Derby. You want it to be on Derby Day.
A little bonus coverage since we have you, Gia. We know how close you are to the coach, Dwayne Lucas, and we know how much, obviously, winning a Derby for him, but then also just being around, hanging out. We've heard it on the Fox shows. You've been spending a lot of time back there in Coach's Barn. What do you think about Secret Oath? Do you think that we're going to see a bounce-back performance from her in the Kentucky Oaks?
I think she's most definitely going to need a bounce-back performance in the Kentucky Oaks. Listen, I think there's a couple of fillies in the Oaks that would make all these colts in the Derby run. I'm not so sure that it's not going to be just as exciting of a race as just a pure fan of the sport and fan of fillies, especially when they're good fillies. I think I'm going to enjoy the Oaks every bit as much as the Kentucky Derby. But Wayne, you know, he's almost gone back to his youth. I called him here about a week ago, just before the Bluegrass, and all he said. I'll just tell you what he said. You know, I think that Secret Oath overcame some rides at Oaklawn Park and still won, and she couldn't overcome. He said, I still think I ran the best filly on the day, and he says, I'm not so sure that I didn't run the best filly, you know, or the best horse with the Ethereal Road and as well. So, you know, he's made changes on both the Ethereal Road and with Secret Oath. And he used to say, listen, this was a date. This wasn't a marriage. So that's you know, he said it to me a couple of times.
I'm sure he broke up with you a few times as well.
He broke some hearts. He broke some hearts during his career, and it didn't matter. But that didn't mean you weren't gonna get another chance, if you know what I mean.
That's beautiful. Gee, I appreciate you taking the time. I look forward to seeing you as soon as possible.
All right, JK. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care. When you look at this year's Kentucky Derby field, one of the horses you'll come across, Tiz the Bomb, you'll see, and you'll have a big question. The horse won on a synthetic surface last time. Is the horse going to handle the dirt? And why speculate when you can ask someone who's sat on his back? Brian, how are you?
I'm good, Jonathan. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Tell me a little bit about Tiz the Bomb. I know you obviously rode him last time in the Jeff Ruby Stake, which is my favorite race name. But you also worked him last time at Churchill Downs on the surface that the Kentucky Derby will be run on. How did he go?
Yeah, he worked well. You know, he's done all his works in the mornings over different dirt surfaces, and he seems to get over Churchill really, really well. He worked a nice smooth half last week in 48 and some change, and you know, he did break his maiden by 14 on the dirt over at Ellis second time out. So we just kind of have to go into the Derby optimistic and know what he's doing really, really well, and kind of just go from there.
From a distance standpoint, obviously every horse will, except I guess maybe for Epicenter, who went the mile and 3/16, will have to kind of answer that question of the mile and a quarter. What's your kind of your thoughts on whether or not Tiz the Bomb will be able to handle that added distance?
Yeah, like you said, it'll be everybody's first time going the mile and a quarter. But in the mile and an eighth race last time, he was getting away from those horses, and one of those horses being Tawny, and you've seen what Tawny came back and did in the Lexington the other day. So that just kind of made us look a little better, and we're just thinking that, you know, he's going into this race the right kind of way, and we think he's an improving 3-year-old.
Does he feel like the type of horse that, you know, he's obviously come from out of it in his last couple of starts? Do you feel like he can be a little bit closer?
Going back into like the Breeders' Cup race, in that race there, I expected to be a lot closer to the pace going around the first turn, and we ended up getting shuffled back. And as we were going on the backside, I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, oh man, there's no way he can be able to make up this kind of ground. And he did. You know, he overcame a tough trip that day, and he ran down some good horses and just missed to be second. So you just kind of got to ride. We're going to kind of wait for the draw and see how the race develops and kind of go from there.
Do you have any preferences where you draw? Would you like to kind of be towards the outside? Do you want to be in a position where you can save some ground? Or do you feel like just you want to keep him in the clear? Any thoughts about where you would like to draw, or just see what happens?
We're just gonna have to see what happens because with the draw like that, that's out of our hand. Once we get the draw and we see what horses are around us, and kind of we'll just have to sit down with Kenny and work out, just try to work out the best trip for the horse. Give him the right kind of trip, and just kind of let him prove what a good horse he is and stay out of his way more than anything.
And Brian, for the new fans, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, tell a fan or a new sporting fan who might not even know a lot about racing, as a rider, what's it like that first Saturday in May when you wake up and you go to the jocks room and you get your colors for the Derby, and then you do the walkout, and then you do my old Kentucky home. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to ride in that race.
It's a big deal, anytime you ride in these big Triple Crown races and these Breeders' Cup races, it's a huge. It's very proud of the moment, and you just got to go to accomplish what you've gotten there, and especially for the horse, there's only 23-year-olds this year that are going to be able to make it into the Derby, so you have to be proud for the horse for what he's been able to accomplish just to get to this point.
Do you remember your first Derby? Were you pretty nervous?
Yeah, you know what? I actually wasn't really nervous. I rode a horse for Mr. Tom Benson, the owner of the Saints. Actually, it was my first Derby, and they made it really easy on us. We had a party a couple nights before the race, and we just all went into it with having a lot of fun and enjoying the moment. And I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is, I've ridden a lot of really big races. And Ian Wilkes, when we won the British Cup Classic, that was the best advice he gave me. He legged me up on Fort Lorna that day, and he goes, just go out there and have fun. And when you ride for those kind of guys that don't put that added pressure on you, and just like they tell you, we've made it this far, so just go out there and have fun. You kind of have an idea of what's gonna happen, so just give the horse the best trip and have fun with it.
Well, Brian, he's kind of got an Animal Kingdom feel to me, so we'll be rooting for you. We wish you the best of luck. Safe trip on Saturday, but also safe trip the rest of the week and all your rides.
Thanks, Jonathan. You too.
Take care.
Next up, we've got an old friend, somebody who's going to be part of our Final Answers show, our live stream on May 4th, the Derby Final Answer show we've done the last couple of years. He is from Medallion Racing. He is Phillip Shelton. How are you, my man?
Doing great, Pete. Thanks for having me.
So we talked ahead of the Lexington about In Due Time in there, and didn't run a bad race. He hits the board again. What did you think of the trip and the performance overall?
I think we couldn't have asked for a much better trip, really. I think he didn't handle the ground great, according to Paco. Watching the race, that's kind of how it looked. He was in a good position. He was under pressure a long way out, which I think historically for us, looking back at horses that we've had that we felt like haven't handled a certain, whether it's they don't like being down inside, they don't like the track, but just felt like he was spinning his wheels. I thought going around the turn, I was like, he's going to be 7th or 8th. He's going to be nowhere. Kind of got his feet underneath him a little bit, rallied on the inside. I think you could argue inside probably wasn't the best part of the track at Keeneland on Saturday, but he ran well enough, for us. We think he's got a lot of ability. Kelly's really high on him. Just thought, hey, wasn't his day on Saturday. No fault to the top 2 horses, but I think just you could tell a long way out that he wasn't going to win. And frankly, I thought he was going to be up the track a little bit. So I was glad he kind of got his feet underneath him. He's still light on experience and seasoning. So, happy to just keep moving forward.
So currently you sit as the second also eligible, but there's chat that Morello might not go. There's chat that early voting might not go. Who knows what else could happen with the runners inside you. Are you committed to running in this race? Should you get in, or is it still a question?
So I think it's up in the air. I talked to Joe Moran from Edge Racing yesterday, who's our partner. And I think we're kind of just going to see, how our horse does. He came out of the race great. He's, went back to the track yesterday went back to the track on Wednesday and is doing well. We're going to see how he trains over the weekend and then try to figure it out. I think there's 2 camps, right? Like there are 20,000 foals born every year. 20 of them make the Derby. For a lot of our partners, they may never be in this position again. And it's hard to just automatically say, hey, we're going to bypass it. But we really want to do what's best for the horse. And I think you could really make a strong argument that waiting for something like the Preakness or, Kelly obviously is based at Monmouth, kind of pointing to the Haskell, working our way back. There's a prep for the Haskell in the middle of June. You could go to the Preakness. He hasn't won a stake, so he's actually eligible for like the Sir Barton Preakness weekend, which, I would think he would be a pretty strong favorite. in there. So I think we have some options. We still think the horse is really good, but I think you look at the Derby also rans every year, and it's like it's a graveyard of 3-year-olds. A lot of them just never come back and do anything. So we don't want to just throw them into the deep end and say, hey, we're going to have a great experience. And, his story is you close the last page of the book. It's over. We think there's a lot left for him. And we just have to weigh all those options.
And you mentioned about partners maybe not having another chance at this. In large part, yes, it's extremely hard to make the Derby, but especially with the medallion partnership, you're focusing mostly on fillies. So it's sort of unusual to get involved in a 3-year-old colt. So I just want to clarify also that's a little bit what you meant by that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even there are people that have been trying to get into the Derby for 50 years and never make it. So it's just a really unique experience. And I think for our guys, we just want to make sure, hey, we're seriously considering every option. The most important part is how the horse trains going into it. And I think the other big thing is, like, if he was 20th and I could tell my guys, hey, you can go buy your $10,000 ticket on Millionaires Row. We're in, we're going, come to Louisville, watch the final work, but embrace everything that the Derby is. That makes it a little bit easier. I'm like, hey, go buy your ticket. We may or may not get in. Now, historically, when you get horses on the fence, you're going to have one other scratch, probably just somebody that gets sick. You had it slow down. Andy got sick. You could have another one normally, week up. So my gut feeling is he probably actually would make the body of the field, but you don't know that. There's no guarantee. The owners of Morello, I don't even want to say early voting. Seth Clareman's done whatever. And he's lived every height, and Chad's obviously top of the level, but the guys that know Morello, they may or may never have the same opportunity. So it's, you don't know, but yeah, I think just a combination, trying to live the full experience and do what's best for the horse.
That walkover does sound like a true life experience for anybody who cares at all about horse racing. So I get it. Either way. We'll see what happens. And one quick favor before I let you get out of here. So we're going to be on the panel for the Final Answer show with Michelle and JK. They've been sparring a bit lately. I might need you to help me referee. Are you up for that?
That's a definite. And I'll tell you what, we had everybody loved it last year. I think a lot of the women were loved that Michelle was there to give some female perspective and give some pushback to JK. And we'll also tweet out a link for anybody that's in Lexington that wants to go to the show. I'll send it to you after this. But we'll be able to send it out. So we're really excited. It's a lot of fun having everybody live. Now post-COVID, it feels like that's actually a reality. Getting people back into a live event. There's nothing better to talk about than the Derby. So it's exciting.
That's going to be great fun, and that's terrific. I wasn't sure if we were going to have some tickets open to the public or not.
Yeah,
we'll make sure to publicize that as well. Phillip, Godspeed. I'll see you soon.
All right, thanks, Pete. I appreciate it.
First up on the show, we've got a guy he's kind of been the MVP of these broadcasts over the last few years. A few years back, 3 years, I think, indeed, he told us about Country House and how he might be a contender. Honestly, I don't remember what he picked 2 years ago. But then last year, he talked all about Rombauer, who didn't compete in the Derby, but did go on to win the Preakness at a nice price. He's one of the most popular guests in the history of the In the Money Media Network. He's professional horse player, Duke Matisse. Duke, how are things?
Hey, Pete, things are good. I don't know if I have a country house this year, but hopefully we have a winner. That's what we have to have.
Well, and that's the thing. So obviously not all of these videos are going to be people talking about horses they like. That would be impossible. But because of Duke's track record of success, instead of saying to him, hey, would you talk about this horse on the Monster Pod? I said, do you have anybody you like? And you responded without hesitation.
Yes. After watching all the prep races, I came up with, a top probably 3 or 4, but my top choice turns out to be the horse I'm going to talk about.
Good old Mo Donegal being that horse, a horse who I thought stamped himself as a contender for this race with the huge run in the Remsen last year. I came out of that thinking it was great form and that Mo Donegal and Zandon were both going to be big contenders for a race like this. But I was told, Duke, that no Remsen winner had ever gone on in 100 years to do well in the Kentucky Derby. That's not the actual stat, but something like that. And then I've been informed, even since the Wood Memorial, that it's been 19 years since a horse coming out of the Wood Memorial was to win the Kentucky Derby. these stats don't bother me too much, but I'm curious, do you think about that stuff at all, the historical significance of a prep like that?
Not really. For the most part, as you know, I'm a trip handicapper. I'm a speed figure guy. I try to, going into Derby, pick something that might get a little overlooked and maybe will be, maybe he's just as good as the top, the top horses. And that's usually what I'm looking for when it comes to Derby, not necessarily the history and who won from, what race and that. I think every year is a little bit different. And, I think this year, I do think the horse Mo Donegal is going to have to beat is Zandon. So that might be my 1-2 punch.
So Mo Donegal has looked like a horse to me who could be among the favorites. But when you look at the international betting, currently 14-1, and you see even some really sharp people giving their opinions on some people who are going to be appearing later on the show, they have him as a double figure price. What price do you think Mo Donegal should be, and what is it that you like about him?
I think what he should be is probably second or third choice is what he should be. I think he's probably going to go off more like fifth, sixth choice. Number one, he's going to get better odds just because he's not going to get who rode him last time. Joel Rosario is going to Steve Asmussen's Horse Epicenter, which I think is a huge mistake. But he's probably got to stick with Asmussen since he's been his number one guy, for most of this year. Mo Donegal attracted my attention, like you said, in the Remsen last year, with just a super solid run into a slow pace. And as a 2-year-old running, we had him running a figure of 93. That's a pretty good number going a mile and an eighth as a 2-year-old. And then when he came back this year, he came back in the Holy Bull, and this worries me a little bit because he got a very strange ride from Murat Ortiz. He got left a little, and he seemed like he was hesitant to, go through holes and stuff. And then, I had a big trip on him that day, so I liked him back, coming back in the wood. And the way Rosario got a little more run out of him, I'm hoping that was just the horse, not the rider. Because as you know, I'm not. I don't usually. I don't ever blame the rider, Pete.
I've never heard you do that before, dude. That's never.
I never blame the jock too much. So anyway, let's not talk about jockeys. Let's talk about horses. This is horse racing. I just love the way he finished in the wood. There was not much pace. He was way back, and he was weaving between, and the last eighth, he just came home like a monster. He just showed me a horse that could go a mile and a quarter and do it well. And we have that figure pretty solid in the 101, 102 range. So I think he's going to go forward off that, coming into he's lightly raced. He should go forward off that race.
For those who are uninitiated, and we have plenty of them on this, especially on YouTube, a lot of new fans come in to watch the Derby content. Duke, your brother, Paul, of course, one of the most famed figure makers there is. And those are the figures you're referring to. How do Mo Donegal's top numbers stack up against Zandon, Epicenter, Taiba, and the other horses who've run big numbers on the commercially available stuff? The
good thing about this year is they're all very similar. So that's why I think who knows what the odds are going to be. They're all in the low 100s. The Bluegrass and the Wood and the San Bernardino Derby all came back very, very similar on our speed figure numbers. So, speed figures nowadays are tougher because of the way these tracks are tending to change as days go on. I don't know what's necessarily causing that. I don't know if it's Track Supers trying to make things perfect or what they're trying to do, but tracks seem to be changing during days. And so you have to be careful with these speed figures nowadays. But visually, I thought, just watching the races visually, Mo Donegal looked like the horse that wants a mile and a quarter. He looked like the horse that was, is getting to where I thought he would get to when he was 2. I thought he would get this far. Now, Zandon is it Zandon or Zandon, or how do you pronounce
I've been saying Zandon.
He impressed me too in the bluegrass because there wasn't much pace and he got shuffled way back. He did a very similar thing. So I think he's a very similar horse to Mo Donegal. So I'm not saying he's that much better, but I know Mo Donegal will be higher odds than Zandon.
Now, both those horses presumably going to need some pace to run at. Forbidden Kingdom, not going to go here. He was sort of expected to be the Derby pace. Epicenter showed the new dimension in rating last time. These California horses have laid down some big pace figures. It seems like Early Voting, who set the pace in the Wood, on the fence about whether to compete in the Derby or maybe just go on to the Preakness. Are we at all worried about getting enough pace for Zandon and Mo Donegal?
A little, I mean, but it is the Derby. There'll be 20 horses. You would hope there's going to be some speed in there. I mean, I don't think Mo Donegal needs to be that far behind either. I think he does have more tactical speed than he necessarily showed in the Wood. That's why I think he's even going to go forward off the race, because I don't think he needs to be that far behind. And, I mean, I think as long as he doesn't draw 20 or 1, I think if he draws anything in the middle, I think he'll be laying, 5th, 6th, 7th, just off the pace. I don't think he'll be far behind as he was in the Wood.
I may be leading you into traffic on this question because you said not to ask you about jockeys, but in all seriousness, Rosario, known as the best finishing rider around, also very good at getting horses to settle. Now going back to Irad, where he had appeared to run in spots in the past. What is your confidence level? You mentioned it before. Maybe it's just the horse maturing. Irad's not a bad finisher. Do you have some confidence, especially with time between now and the Derby, that he can get the same kind of ride under Irad Ortiz?
Yeah, I mean, Irad rode him in the Remsen, and he really wasn't far behind in the Remsen either, especially early on. He got maybe shuffled a little, which that worries me, is that both times Irad's ridden him in stake races, he's gotten shuffled a little bit. So with 20 horses in the Derby, that does become an issue if the horse doesn't like dirt in his face. But it's weird. He had a ton of dirt in his face in this last race, so I don't think it's that. So I'm just hoping it's the horse maturing is what I'm hoping it is, instead of the rider fitting the horse. I do agree that Joel is probably a better one run closing type rider than Irad. It's Irad's kind of a he's like a push button, get the quick run, get the jump on everybody else. He's kind of that kind of rider. So, which I think might help in the Derby in this case, because I think the pace might be, like you said, a little bit slower than a normal Derby. So that move early, push button, like get the jump might be a better move than sitting way back and making one run.
You make a great case. He was the first pick in our Derby draft. You can find that YouTube video or the podcast and the In the Money feeds in various places. Duke, can't wait to see you down there in Louisville.
Yeah, it'll be great. It's gonna be a good Derby. It's gonna be hopefully good weather, and it should be a great horse race because we have a lot of horses that are solid this year, as in a couple of years past. I think we don't have a big favorite, which is good, and we don't have what I would call a weaker Derby field. We have a good field of horses this year.
Talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, great.
Next up on the show, very happy to welcome back another guest I always love to have on these airwaves. We had him not long ago to talk about his new book, Then 1 Year. We got into a side conversation, as one does, and I honestly think this next guest might be the first person to confidently give a Derby pick on the In the Money airwaves. It was before the last prep race, making it far more impressive. He was talking about Epicenter. His name is Chris Andrews from the South Point in Las Vegas. Chris, how are things?
I'm doing great, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Do you have a financial position on this horse?
Not yet. Peter, I've bet Derby horses in the futures before and have gotten burned on late scratches and that sort of thing. I've done well with them too. I've had definitely some very, very good scores in the futures, but this time I felt the price was a little too short by the time I decided to play, and I figured I'm better off just waiting until post time, making sure that he's going to be in Kentucky, going to be in the gate come post time. But I most definitely will have a financial position on them once they go to post.
What attracted you to Epicenter in the first place?
Well, I really first of all, I love Joel Rosario. He's probably my favorite jockey right now. I like the way in the Risen Star, he went to the front and never yielded at all, and really extended his lead in the last furlong. And I loved his breeding. The sire is Not This Time, who was very lightly raced, finished second to Classic Empire in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but he was really coming in that race. The Classic Empire was another terrific horse, but Not This Time was really coming hard. I think another 16th of a mile, I think he would have nailed him. So he's a horse to me that looks like that. His sire was a horse that looks like he wanted to go a route. Now, he's also out of a Candy Ride mare. I love the Candy Rides. Over the years, if you have ever listened to my other podcast, I always speak very highly of Candy Ride. And I noticed another thing with the nick, they say, is with Candy Ride out of any Stormcat blood. And Not This Time has that Stormcat blood. Candy Ride, some of the ones, the nicks that they are talking about, Shared Belief, who I believe was the best horse in training at the time, got wiped out in the Breeders' Cup Classic, never had a chance to show it. Sydney's Candy, another multimillionaire, and of course Gun Runner, who won over $15 million on the track. So there's that nick. And below that, below Candy Ride in his female family is Ella Manamu and Sadler's Wells, two great stamina influences. So this horse showed tremendous speed. And then in the following race, the Louisiana Derby, he actually got held back a little bit and came off the pace. So to me, he's shown he can win on the front end. He could be a stalking horse if he needs to be. And like I said, I love Rosario, and I'm sure as the race unfolds, Rosario will have him in a terrific position. It's always hard to do because I'm assuming there's going to be 20 horses in this race. But if I had to have my money on one jock right now, I mean, Rosario would be certainly in the hunt among the great jockeys that'll be riding in that particular race.
He's fabulous. And as a Mo Donegal backer, I was certainly a little bit trepidatious to see Rosario choose Epicenter over Mo Donegal. It makes sense based on politics, based on what Epicenter has accomplished. It's not like I'm losing a whole lot getting around Ortiz Jr., but I do echo your sentiments on Rosario.
No, Irad, I'll tell you, if Rosario is not my favorite, Irad would be right there. So, yeah, it's not a big downfall. But, of course, you got Asmussen, who's never won a Derby. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that. He's also not been great with stakes races over a piece of ground. And I understand that. I also think he maybe has not had the right horse a lot of times. And this time I think he does. And I think he finds the winner's circle first Saturday in May.
An unbelievable story. Asmussen, winningest trainer there is. I think I forget the stat. It's something like 0 for 22 in the Derby, but Derbies are hard to win. It's not like that's some hideous, unovercomable stat. Does it give you any pause at all that he hasn't won the race?
No, like I said, the fact that he hasn't won a Derby doesn't bother me. Although I think it was Andy Sterling was talking today about how he hasn't been great with routers in Grade 1 races. And I think Asmussen's background, they came out of the quarter horse ranks, so he knows how to get a horse out of the gate pretty well. So I think that, and again, it might be a little bit deceiving. He's just had such tremendous success in races that haven't gone over a piece of ground. It's easy to say, well, he hasn't been as successful here. He still has quite a few winners, even in horses that do route. And I think this horse is bred to go that route, and I think he's bred to do it on the dirt rather than on the turf. And I think I really think that horse is going to be in the winner's circle on Derby Day.
And I mean, hey, you mentioned Gun Runner before. That wasn't far from a winning effort for an Asmussen trainee in the Derby. Just, a lot has to go right. Well, we appreciated you being the first to tip Epicenter on these airwaves. We doubt you will be the last. Always great to catch up with you. Before you go, though, Chris, just want to encourage folks to check out your new book, Then 1 Year. Just a fabulous look at behind the curtain at what goes on in a bookmaker's life. There's some good racing content in there. There's some amazing content about a year of sports like no other. We want folks to check that out for sure.
Well, thank you, Peter. And if you hang out with me for a year, there's definitely some racing content somewhere along the line. I can tell you that.
Chris, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Peter. Thank you.
Well, we had to bring in some California reinforcements. The California horses are always dangerous on this Triple Crown Trail. Jose, what do you think about Happy Jack?
Well, happy to see you, JK, and happy to be on. And Happy Jack, California's in a good role. But what I found interesting about Happy Jack, and I don't know if you know what's the current situation in Churchill, but his best outing was his debut win when he used Lasix. His last 3 starts after that, no Lasix. He's got a trainer that has won 2 out of the last 10 runnings of the Derby. That's the only trainer outside of Baffert in the last 10 years that has won the most Derbies in the last decade. Doug O'Neill, he won it with I'll Have Another and Nyquist. And also, it looks like the rider that's going to be picking up the mount is Rafael Bejarano. I mean, Rafael Bejarano and Doug O'Neill, they had a ton of success here in SoCal, and Rafael knows Churchill very well from his time riding out in Kentucky. So that's a couple of things on the positive to look at. Now, on the flip side, he wasn't much of a threat since his debut win. But looking at his racing style, what I've seen in the replays, he's a little bit of a green horse. He kind of allows horses to get away from him, and then he shows a little bit of a mild bit. I don't know if he's still learning and developing, but when you looked at his maiden diploma, the way he rallied and kind of turned it into another gear when things got busy in the stretch, that was Lasix. He hasn't been allowed with Lasix since then. So, JK, maybe that's something to look for if he's allowed to get back on Lasix back in Kentucky.
Yeah, I agree with the Doug O'Neill aspect. Doug's the type of guy, his training style, his horses always seem to have no issue stretching out. Jump up and surprise you a little bit, but I guess it is a little bit concerning. Like you mentioned, his last 3 starts, he hasn't really made any impact, but in all fairness, he's been chasing pretty talented horses in Messier, Forbidden Kingdom, and Tabia. So in your opinion, is Happy Jack a type of horse that can win this race, or do you think he's more of a horse you want to use underneath? Or sadly, do you feel like he might be a horse that you probably want to toss in the spot?
It's going to take a lot of good things to happen for him to me seeing him winning the Derby. But I think there's angles to look at where I think he can run much better. I would not be, opposed to using this horse in the exotics. A lot of things have to go right, and there has to be significant improvement for him to be a legitimate threat on the win end. But I can see this horse at a price being in there in the mix to get into some of those exotics.
Jose, I appreciate you taking the time, and we hope to see you soon.
All right. Thanks, JK.
That's going to do it for this Monster Pod. PTF here, thanking everyone who appeared on these shows, especially JK for all the work he did, and especially wanted to thank all of you, the listeners, for making these shows so much fun to do. Remember, get involved at the chance to win a $200 bet on the Derby. Sign up for our free newsletter in themoneypodcast.com/email and drop a comment on either video, the Oaks video or the Derby video, letting us know who you think is going to win this year's Oaks and Derby. Quick thank you to our founding partners, 10 Strike Racing around here. You know how we always love to root for the purple and black. And, of course, the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. Donate generously to them. trfinc.org/players. What else do we want to thank? We're going to thank producer Craig and producer AJ. We needed them both to bring these shows to you, and we appreciate them very much. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. Our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our chief creative officer is Jonathon Kinchen. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your Kentucky Derby and Oaks photos.